So, one day, this young Archduchess Kanemia heads down into the creepy dungeon. There, locked in a cell, was this kid who, according to the knights, had trespassed on castle grounds. And when they caught him, he was covered head to toe in blood, and it wasn't his. They told him to scram at first, but the kid just stood there, frozen like a statue. And he kept muttering, like he was tripping, saying he'd taken care of them all, but now he sees there are survivors. One of the knights stepped closer, shined a light on him, and recognized the young punk. This little dude, looking like he'd just walked out of a nightmare, wasn't just any kid. He passed out when they grabbed him, or things could have gotten really messy. And Kanemia was about to meet this boy, who they figured was a criminal. She'd thought everything through, and was sure things would go exactly as she planned. Nanny Vanessa and the knight still told her to be careful. From the outside, it looked like a little whim, but she had to see Ian Krotz. She had her reasons. She'd been reborn as Kanemia Lion, stuck in the Aldium Chronicles novel. Worst of all, she was destined to die. She got all the memories right after her father passed. And she didn't get why she was reborn as this character from a novel she thought was pretty lame. The original Kanemia Lion was a major villainess, and all her troubles started with her family's messed up history. Her grandpa, Archduke Kenneth Lion, was known as a righteous nutjob and a real loudmouth. He cleaned up the empire by, dealing with a ton of corrupt nobles. But because of that, he eventually bit the dust at the hands of people wanting payback. Kanemia's mom was named Iria Lion, and she was a total badass with a sword. She was such a great commander that taking over neighboring kingdoms was a piece of cake. But during the victory celebration, someone got revenge and took her out. The other member of the family was Kanemia's dad, Troy Lion, who was ridiculously good-looking. When his wife died, he fell into a deep funk, refusing to believe she was gone. But he decided to get into business to secure his daughter's future. And let me tell you, it took some serious hustling to get investors on board. Things started off pretty well, but a few years later, he was also killed as an act of revenge. So Kanemia was left all alone and became the target of nasty rumors, people calling her a villain. They said she inherited her grandpa's ruthlessness, her mom's aggression, and her dad's killer looks. The girl insisted she wasn't cruel and hadn't hurt anyone, and she didn't think looking like her dad was some kind of flaw. But no one believed her, and she grew up surrounded by hostility and distrust. As a result, Kanemia Lion became a ruthless ruler. And the novel's hero, hearing the pleas of the people in her lands, well, he brought her reign to an end. That was the story of the heroine in the novel, Chronicles of Aldium. And having been reborn as the young villainess, the girl was freaking out, not wanting to bite the dust. Just this morning, her nanny Vanessa knocked and brought her a stuffed animal with super cute cheeks. The maid noticed the young lady had been really down lately and wanted to cheer her up. Kanemia loved the toy and thanked Vanessa for being so thoughtful. After fiddling with her for a bit, the princess thought she looked like a little monster. Then it hit her. At the start of the story, the main character accidentally gets a super powerful monster, and that monster ends up helping him achieve fame and fortune. Kanemia decided she wanted one too, so she needed to remember all the details. Getting the monster before the main character would give her a fighting chance to survive. There's also the hero, a candidate for head of the magic tower, a mysterious figure who always shows up at the right time. It would be great to get such a powerful ally, but that's way too risky. In the novel, he helped the main character execute Kanemia, so she decided to stay away from dangerous characters. In the original story, Kanemia caught Ayan and played with him like a toy. But now she decided to be nice to him, so he wouldn't hold a grudge against her. When she got to the dungeon, she saw him huddled on a bench. The kid saw her and immediately asked how he should properly greet a young archduchess. He wanted to be polite, to make a good first impression. Then he wondered if she'd come to just finish him off right there. Kanemia wasn't thinking anything like that, and immediately ordered the knight to release the prisoner. Ayan, on the other hand, decided to let him go so he could hunt him down later. The girl was outraged, saying she wasn't going to kill Rakasha. Rakasha's the #2 guy in the magic tower, and the knight was shocked she knew that. Even the prisoner himself was genuinely surprised she knew he was Rakasha. Kanemia wasn't about to explain that. She just told him to stay out of her sight from now on. After that, she was stoked, thinking she'd finally cut ties with Ian and could chill out. But a few days later, she got some weird news and had to go check it out herself. There in the dungeon sat the same kid she'd just let go. She was totally floored, but Ian just calmly explained that they'd caught him again. Kanemia let him go, again, but the dude kept getting captured over and over. When she went to see him, she saw a guard casually offering him some grub. Ian was super into the pie, but they only served it on Wednesdays, and he was itching for Wednesday to get here. Kinemia's yell cut the cute chat short, demanding to know why he kept getting caught. She even thought he might have a beef with her, even though she hadn't done anything to him. But he had no reason to hate her, since they'd never even met before. But somehow, word got out that the young lady was looking for a bodyguard. Realizing the guard must have spilled the beans, Kinemia shot him a look that could kill. And Ian, all smiles, told the princess he wanted to be her bodyguard. He's not exactly swamped at the magic tower, plus he's got a knack for magic. And he doesn't care if the job's tough, and he has to be around Kinemia all the time. Looking at his smug face, it wasn't hard to guess he wasn't backing down. And the girl was worried he might hold a grudge if she turned him away again. Kinemia agreed to take him on temporarily, until her wounds healed. She planned to keep a close eye on him for a while, then definitely kick him to the curb. So she took him to the castle, and the servants were a little surprised her bodyguard was so young. They also know he's a Rakasha and a candidate for head of the tower. They figured the young miss hired him as a bodyguard because he's a Rakasha. Everyone thought Kinemia was super brave, just like her mom. Vanessa stopped the young lady and Ayan on their way to the meeting hall. She asked them to grab some cookies she'd baked for them. The bodyguard got stuck carrying the bag of cookies. But he didn't walk far before tossing them out the window, because he wasn't going to eat that junk. He got reamed for that, told they were trying to be nice, and he shouldn't act like that. But Ayan wasn't just not sorry. He didn't see anything wrong with what he did, which led Kinemia to conclude the kid was a total head case. She didn't chew him out, though, just hurried him along to the meeting that was already starting. In the hall, several vassals were already at the table, hashing out Kinemia's position. They didn't like that some little girl, who couldn't even run things, was already head of the family. Just then, an older woman walked in, immediately stating she disagreed with their take. She thinks the young lady is super sharp and picks up on everything right away. So she'll back any decision the little miss makes and asked them not to argue about it. Besides, what's way more important right now is that the Lion family's influence has weakened. Soon enough, the young Archduchess arrived, with Ayan right on her heels. The older woman was surprised to see Rakasha, especially since they weren't with a nanny. The girl entered with a majestic stride, and the whole vibe in the room shifted instantly. She knew the weight of her responsibilities, and before, she'd just dumped all the decisions on her vassals, who were down to just 4 now. But things had changed, and she couldn't act like a kid anymore. It was time to show them, once and for all, who was really in charge. Kinemia headed for the family head's chair, which was way too big for her. One of the vassals immediately got his back up, complaining that she brought Rikisha instead of a nanny. Like she's trying to prove she can handle everything herself. Vanessa used to help her get up there, but Kinemia was determined to do it on her own this time. She figured she wouldn't deserve to be called Archduchess if she couldn't even get into the chair. Straining a bit, she started to climb, which turned out to be no easy feat. Everyone in the hall stared in shock as the little girl tried to conquer this obstacle. But she wasn't giving up. Gripping the seat, she was almost there. But then the darn seat betrayed her and slid right off the chair. And that's how the young Archduchess suffered a crushing defeat. The vassals immediately looked away, like they hadn't seen a thing. So convincingly, in fact, that the little one actually bought their act. Then Ayan picked her up, surprisingly strong for his age. He sat her back on the chair and even fixed her messy hair. But then the vassals jumped all over him, yelling that the Archduchess could have sat down herself. She's just a little short. One of them even said that when she grows up, she'll be twice as tall as Rakashi. This guy went on to describe her like a fairy, whose wings only people with pure hearts can see. Kinemia just stood there, listening to them argue, and she was dying of embarrassment. Finally, she'd had enough and told them to knock it off. The next day, the young Archduchess headed into town. She needed to see some blacksmiths. The streets were packed, because today was the big market day. They arrived with Ayan in the carriage, and then decided to go on foot. The guy asked what exactly they were looking for. Kinemia was searching for a shop with a frog sign. That's where the blacksmiths were located. She wanted to make slime toys out of the remains of monsters they'd found on the coast. They're super soft and nice to the touch, and the kids back at the estate will love them. Besides, she knows some craftsmen who'll do an awesome job with this. At the meeting, when she pitched that idea, her people were practically giving her a standing O. I guess everyone was stoked that the young Archduchess was planning her first big venture. And now, Ian's cracking jokes about those smiths turning her into the slime queen. What he doesn't get is why she'd come herself. She's got like 1 million servants. Truth is, Kinemia had another reason for being here, but she kept it to herself, just told him to let her know if Ian spotted the sign. The girl started looking around, remembering the shop should be somewhere close, but pushing through the crowd was a real pain. Barely squeezing through, Kinemia turned back to tell Ian to keep up, but he was gone. The kid just vanished into thin air, and the girl started freaking out because she was totally alone, even if she was dressed like a commoner. She didn't want to risk her neck, so now she was looking for a bodyguard. Just then, some dude figured out she'd lost her buddy. A kinda balding guy politely pointed out the direction her friend went. Kinemia thanked him, and the guy told her to be careful, since she was still a kid. He even offered to help her get through, so she wouldn't get trampled by the crowd. The girl agreed, and they headed out to the street, where there were way fewer people. At first, she didn't suspect anything, but a little further on, she noticed there was nobody around at all. Smelling a rat, she decided to politely say goodbye to the Good Samaritan, but he immediately grabbed her arm so she couldn't get away. The guy's face, which had seemed so kind before, twisted into a nasty smirk, and Kinemia knew right then, this dude wasn't planning anything nice. She yanked her arm away, managing to break free, but she didn't even try to run. She grabbed a broom lying nearby and threatened to beat him to a pulp if he came any closer. The broom was a little longer than she was, which cracked the guy up. He started mocking her, saying she'd be better off just sweeping the street with it. Meanwhile, Kinemia was kicking herself for blindly following a stranger, who started moving closer, looking like he wanted to teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. The kid knew she was outmatched, but she still demanded he leave her alone. Her threats were useless, because let's be real, what could a little girl do against a huge, fat dude? Okay, now he was seriously pissed and planning to teach her a lesson in manners she wouldn't forget. Kinemia didn't show any fear, but she was mentally cursing Ian out, the guy who begged to be her bodyguard, and now, when she actually needed him, he's vanished into thin air. Just then, a little bird flew over the city. Spotting Ian chilling on the roof, it zipped over and started scolding him for not being where he should be. It was his teacher, who had transformed into a bird. The little sparrow landed on his shoulder, and Ian asked him to take a look down at the girl with the broom. He explained to his teacher that she'd recognized him as Rakasha, even though she had no magic herself. He hadn't told her anything about himself. He couldn't afford to make that kind of mistake. His teacher also noticed that the girl was currently in a world of trouble. Ian was down with that, but he figured she was just holding back on him. He was still surprised she was using a broom in this situation, though. Then the teacher chewed Ian out and ordered him to save the girl, pronto. The dude was down there in a flash, startling her a bit, and announced he'd rescue her. Kinemia naturally started yelling at him for taking so long, and Ian apologized. He didn't waste any time talking, just snapped his fingers real smooth, and magic happened. The air around the bad guy instantly started crushing him, like it was squeezing his throat shut. He writhed in agony, barely able to choke out that he couldn't breathe. The kids were just watching, and in seconds, the guy's face was already turning purple. It wasn't that Kinemia felt sorry for him, but she told Ian to knock it off. But the kid argued back, saying it'd be better to off the creep who tried to hurt the little girl. He even had this glint in his eyes, and Kinemia started to get the creeps. And while the dude was still choking, they were arguing about whether he deserved to live. The villain, in agony, looked up at the young mage who'd done this to him, and he swore to himself, if he survived, he'd definitely find him and make him pay. But the situation took a completely unexpected turn for everyone. The guy felt a hard whack on the back of his head, and everything went dark. The next thing he knew, he was out cold, collapsing face first onto the ground. One of the two red-haired girls walking by had clocked him with a frying pan, and she told the kids to bring their parents next time, since it's dangerous to wander around alone on market day. Then, she hoisted the dude over her shoulder, ready to drag him to the cops, but her sister offered to take the kids home. Kinemia confessed she was looking for a gun shop with a frog sign. The girl suddenly froze, because that was the shop where she worked. This time, their escort was actually on the level, and the kids got to the shop pretty quick. The redheads, Behemoth and Kinemia, never thought they'd run into each other like this. And on top of that, they were the slime masters themselves. In the original novel, these blacksmith girls are described as seriously talented. But once inside, Kinemia realized they weren't exactly rolling in dough. Still, she complimented their work, especially digging the weapons. The sisters thought it was weird that a little girl was so interested in that kind of stuff, but they thought she was so adorable. They just had to get her something. But then Kinemia announced she'd buy out their whole stock, and even put in a special order. And so the sisters wouldn't just stand there gawking. She introduced herself as Kanemia Lion. She also made sure to mention she's the head of the lion family. The Behemoth sisters knew that family well, and they immediately cleared the mess off the table and made a spot for the princess. They even brought out their best cookies and brewed some tea. Then, massaging her shoulders, they asked what she wanted to order. For a moment, Kanemia was totally blown away, realizing what power tasted like. In the novel, these sisters made weapons for the main character, because they're the best blacksmiths in the Empire. Usually, the weapons in this world have a weakness. They break down from monster blood. That's why weapons in battles like those had to be swapped out all the time, and that cost a fortune. So, Kanemia wanted a weapon for herself that wouldn't get wrecked by monster blood. You can make them from the monster's remains, but you need a blacksmith with a special aura. Luckily, the Behemoth sisters had that power, and Kanemia was going to place an order with them. And not just any order, she offered them an exclusive deal. She wanted them to join the lion family and only make weapons for them. The girls thought it sounded like a raw deal, like Kanemia wanted to own them. But one of them, Lana, figured a sweet girl like her wouldn't try to pull a fast one. And then Kanemia went on to say she wanted a sword that could stand up to monster blood. A sword that wouldn't need to be tossed after every fight, tough and dependable. The girls were blown away. Nobody had ever made a weapon like that before. Seriously, who'd even think about forging a sword from monster bones? Still, the sisters were curious why Kanemia came to them, just a couple of village blacksmiths. And they were floored that the kid knew they had a special aura. Her mom told her about it when they brought her the sword at the mansion. She explained it was forged with an aura. Arya Leon was famous as a hero, and the sisters were stoked their skills were so valued. After that, they agreed to work with Kanemia and give that sword a shot. Plus, the offer was sweet, and they'd get everything they needed to do the job. Meanwhile, Ian was just scratching his head, wondering how his charge knew so much. He still didn't get why she came here alone, instead of sending servants. This only made him think she was hiding something from him even more. The girl noticed someone peeking in the window and figured it was one of the Behemoth sisters' employees. A young dude named Brian was nosy and spying on the strange visitors that showed up. But when he realized he'd been spotted, he immediately ducked down out of sight. Lana was seriously ticked off that he was sticking his nose where it didn't belong without asking, so she grabbed a hammer and chased after him outside to teach him a lesson he wouldn't forget. Her sister Sayer apologized to the Archduchess and ran after her, and the kids were left inside, totally confused about what the heck was going on. That guy didn't just hide, he took off running from there like his tail was on fire. He was running so fast, he barely felt the ground beneath his feet. Thing is, the Behemoth sisters were seriously fast runners too. They caught up to him real quick and grabbed him by the scruff of the neck to stop him. That wasn't enough, and Lana even slammed him into the ground for being disobedient. The guy didn't get why they were chasing him, but the sisters just chewed him out, calling him a low-life creep. Lana also reminded him she'd promised to make him regret it if she ever saw him near the house again. She'd already roughed him up a while back for peeping on her. Brian swore that wasn't what was happening, and that she was just being paranoid, which only pissed her off more, and she went to swing a hammer at him, but her sister immediately grabbed her arm, stopping her from doing something she'd regret. Lana didn't understand her sister. She was furious at the jerk and wanted to teach him a lesson he wouldn't forget. And Sayer reminded her that her temper last time cost them customers. Brian just kept yelling he wasn't peeping on anyone. Then, with this smirk, he demanded proof. He even claimed the sisters were just trying to shake him down, accusing him of things he didn't do. Lana got even angrier, and her sister was barely holding her back. The guy also pointed out the building belongs to his dad, so he has every right to be there. Then he snickered that their stuff was garbage, and Lana just about lost it. Suddenly, people started whispering that the sisters were acting out because they had no business. Sayer kept trying to get her sister to leave and ignore him, and Brian just kept agreeing, saying they were making things up about him because he was just trying to buy something out of pity. The whispers on the street got even louder. The girls realized, yet again, that people would rather believe gossip than find out the truth. Once upon a time, a woman demanded they apologize for getting into a fight with her son. Back then, the little sisters obediently apologized to the brat. Sayer especially apologized like crazy, just so they wouldn't get yelled at. Lana hated that her sister often apologized for her and didn't think she was in the wrong. She didn't want Sayer to apologize now either, so she agreed to just leave. She didn't know what got into her sister, but was glad she calmed down. And Brian just laughed after them, like he wanted to humiliate them even more. He yelled at the crowd, saying they were running away because he was right. And he said he immediately smelled something fishy, 'cause girl blacksmiths? That's just plain weird. On the way home, Lana apologized to her sister for dragging her into this mess, 'cause they're in trouble again, and it's again because of her, and that made her tear up. Sayer barely recognized her sister right now, but she knew she was genuinely sorry. Even when they were kids, they had to move around all the time. And Sayer was getting tired of it. She just wanted to live in one place, peacefully. Like after that fight with that kid, even though he was the one who started it by making fun of Lana. Her sister taught her that no matter what, you can't just go around punching people, 'cause that's why they're gonna be wandering around their whole lives, and they don't even have anyone to help them. Lana stopped her sister then, grabbing her hand. And she asked me not to be sad because they have each other. And since nobody wants to look out for them, they can do it themselves. They've always done it that way, and she believes they can keep hanging in there. Other people don't want to accept them, and they don't even try to understand. At one point, Lana decided they shouldn't try to please everyone else, and if nobody believes in them, they have to have each other's backs. Right now, Sayer felt bad that her sister was feeling so down. She decided to do things differently, because she's always on her side. And going back to Brian, she decided to take a swing at him herself, but just as she swung to smash his rotten skull, the hammer vanished. The dude was so freaked out, he probably peed himself a little and started yelling even more, while Sayer was just totally lost. Just then, Kanemia strolled up with her bodyguard in tow. She's the one who ordered Ahyan to make the hammer vanish, and now she was going to handle things herself. The hammer didn't actually disappear. It teleported. Ahyan's just messing around with it now. The sisters were just blown away, like, how did this little kid even know where they'd be? And the girl walked right up to Brian, who was too scared to even twitch. Then she demanded, like she was the boss, that he apologize to Sayer and Lana, but the guy just got pissed that a little girl was telling him what to do and tried to shoo her away. He yelled that he had nothing to apologize for and that those girls were the ones who were lying about him. But Kanemia wasn't buying it, especially since he'd just been caught peeking at them, and she was actually hashing out a really important, profitable deal with them at that moment. So it doesn't make sense for them to accuse him just to shake him down for cash. Brian figured all women are greedy for money, and he believes even these two are capable of that. At the same time, he was trying to figure out what kind of girl she was. You couldn't tell she was an aristocrat by her clothes. Thinking she was a merchant's daughter, he advised her not to make deals with people who have nothing to offer, and added that it would be easier for them to squeeze money out of his old man. Lana started arguing, saying he doesn't even know what a real sword looks like. But he doesn't need to, not with his dad. In his position, he doesn't need to work at all. Suddenly, Kanemia noticed that with his scrawny little arms, he couldn't even lift a hammer, and that he's only good for bragging, hiding behind daddy's money. Brian was so pissed, he was about to smack her for the insult, but he had to stop dead in his tracks when someone showed up. Just then, Earl Brown walked by and asked what the hell was going on. The guy was stoked to see him and decided to rat out Kanemia. First, he said hello, introduced himself, and reminded him they met at the last party. Then he started whining about how these people had just made some pretty wild accusations against him. But the Earl wasn't even listening anymore. He recognized the girl as the young Archduchess and dropped to one knee. Brian was in total shock, not believing it was actually Lady Lion. And with his jaw hanging open, he heard the Earl expressing his concern about her being out here alone. He was dying to know why the Archduchess would come here herself. But then Kanemia pointed right at him and declared he was a creep, harassing the masters she'd chosen. She asked Count Brown to punish him for his wicked deeds. The girls backed her up, saying he'd been peeping on them and spreading nasty rumors. He even insulted them in public, and apparently tried to hit the young Archduchess. Brian started yelling that it was all a misunderstanding, but Kanemia just looked at him like he was toast. 'Cause the Count doesn't just talk things out, and for attempted assault, this dude could be looking at the ultimate price. Now she's demanding he apologize again, and he's totally lost, doesn't know how things got so out of hand. The crowd started whispering again, but this time they were all talking about Brian. The guy was shaking like a leaf, knowing he could lose his eyes and his tongue at best, and stumbling over his words, he begged the sisters for forgiveness, admitting he was in the wrong. Then he finally got the nerve to ask if an apology would make this whole thing go away. But the Earl's knights grabbed him right then and there, so he ain't getting off that easy. Plus, the Earl's got a whole stack of complaints about him, so he's in for a serious talking to. 'Cause he's been making unwanted advances on a bunch of women, and every time he tries to weasel his way out of it. As they dragged Brian away, he kept yelling that he was innocent and being framed. After that, the Earl said goodbye to the Archduchess because he had to take care of this situation. Once he was gone, the sisters called out to Kanemia, thanking her. If she hadn't shown up when she did, Sayer would have done something she'd really regret. The girl was happy too, because in the original story, they were sent to the battlefield and branded as murderers. And then she asked if they were ready to make a deal with her now, especially since she already announced it publicly, and she wouldn't want to be a liar. The Behemoth sisters exchanged glances and smiled at each other, letting everyone know they were on board. After a short while, the Archduchess was presented with her first slime. Kanemia was pleasantly surprised, since she hadn't asked the sisters to do this. They just didn't want to waste the leftover materials. And besides, it wasn't exactly rocket science. The slime felt really nice, and the girl couldn't resist giving it a squeeze. She liked it so much, she couldn't put it down. And the sisters promised to make different colored toys next time. A little later, Ayana's teacher stopped by, asking how much longer he was going to be hanging around. The guy was planning to stay until his wound healed, even though it had been a few months already. He said he got so messed up back then, the wound still hasn't healed. He was totally faking it, but the teacher bought it and let him stay longer. Though he did mention the elders weren't exactly thrilled with what he did. He offed some people, but Ahyan argued they attacked first. He was just defending himself. Except it was 15 mages from the magic tower, so self-defense is a bit of a stretch. The guy just bragged that he left one alive, Leon, the elder's golden boy. Besides, he's got one more important experiment to run here. He wants to see if the young Archduchess has anything special going on. Meanwhile, Kanemia wasn't just focusing on business. She started training too. The Behemoth sisters already forged a batch of weapons, and they made the girl's sword a little lighter. Even with that thing, she got super tired after swinging it around for a while. Ayan watched her train and noticed she'd been looking really sleepy lately too. That's because she's got to work her tail off and handle a ton of stuff now. Kanemia was just planning on raking in the dough by using powerful allies. But she never thought she'd have to grind this hard. Sometimes she's barely standing. And there she goes, tripping over her own feet again. But Ayan caught her just in time. Her face instantly turned red from embarrassment, and the guy figured she was into him. Truth is, she felt like a total idiot every time she talked to him. Ayan decided to pull a fast one to get her attention again. He flipped open his jacket to show her that wound of his had opened up again. He explained the wound was taking so long to heal because it was inflicted with magic. Even so, 5 months seemed like an awfully long time to the young Archduchess. The girl wanted a closer look and accidentally touched the wound, unintentionally hurting him. The guy noticed that even though she was exhausted, she still felt deep sympathy for him. And it seemed to him that now was the perfect time to put his plan into action. Recently, his teacher realized that Ayan wanted to use forbidden mind control magic, and forbade it because the girl was very young and it could cause irreparable harm to her health. He begged his student to listen to him because there was a reason why this magic was forbidden. However, the boy pointed out that this was precisely what he was supposed to be doing. And now, with Kanemia standing before him, he decided to use it. The girl didn't even realize what hit her when he touched her face to trigger the magic. For a split second, she was like, totally out of it, and Ayan was trying to get her to spill what she was hiding. But Kanemia just sighed and then asked him what he'd just done. Obviously, the magic didn't work for some reason, so he just said she looked spaced out. She didn't find that funny and decided to call it quits for the day's training. And Ayan was racking his brain, trying to figure out how she blocked mind control magic. I mean, this girl doesn't even have magic, so he's starting to wonder who the heck she is. He asked her why she was pushing herself so hard, even though no one was making her. And she admitted that she promised her mom she'd train every day. Suddenly, she got curious and wanted to know something about his parents. But she stopped mid-sentence, worried it would just push him away. Still, the guy admitted his parents ditched him when he was just a kid. He was only 7 back then, but the way he acts now, you'd think he doesn't even care. That day, his dad put a blindfold on him, saying it was going to be a surprise. They walked for ages. The kid felt damp earth under his feet, but his questions got him nowhere. All he cared about was that for once, his dad was holding his hand, so he just went along with it. Soon they stopped, and his dad told him to stay put and not take off the blindfold. He even asked him to count to 100, promising him a gift, saying he was a big boy now and could wait a little while. And that's when it hit him that the whole thing might be a lie. The kid thought his dad would ditch him and never come back. but he still waited, like a chump. Now, he got how he'd been played for a fool by his old man's request. But Kanemia thought his story was a real heartbreaker, and she felt even worse for him. Wanting to comfort him somehow, she reached out her hand and gave his cheek a friendly stroke, letting him know she felt for him. She also told him there was nothing dumb about what he did back then. A little later, the Archduchess had another appointment scheduled. Priestess Andrea came to see her, but with the bad news that she was stepping down. 'Cause her age is starting to catch up with her, and her divine powers are fading. Kanemia understood, but she was curious when the new priest would arrive. What was even more messed up was that the church decided to shut down the temple on their land. She figured it was because of Duke Roslin, but Andrea couldn't say anything about it. That duke's like the church's biggest sugar daddy, and the Lyons family, they've got beef. His daughter, Rosalind, was head over heels for Kanemia's dad, but he turned her down, and now the duke's family is out for revenge. But if the temple closes, the people won't be able to get any healing, and the priestess told the little one not to sweat it, believing that God would definitely help her out. Meanwhile, somewhere in a remote shack that looked pretty run down, inside, it was a total disaster, like nobody had ever heard of cleaning. On a bed by the window lay a skinny dude with long dark hair. He was watching the falling leaves of a tree, waiting for the last one to drop. He sighed heavily, knowing his life was about to end right then and there. Lately, he'd been battling the bottle, and now he was going through serious withdrawals. Before he kicked the bucket, he just wanted one last drink to ease the pain a little. A young guy, a student of Lou's, was sitting next to him, killing time by knitting. He told him not to talk crazy, saying he'd live another 100 years. But the man reached out a shaky hand, begging him to pour just one little cup. The kid acted like he didn't hear him, even turned away, checking out his knitting project. And while the master's arm hung limp, he dressed the cat in the knitted thing. All the sick guy could do was curse out this punk, calling him a heartless monster, saying he had zero compassion, not even enough to go grab him a little something to drink. What really got under his skin was that he'd bring her some cheap swill, and she'd tell him to find something better tasting. She was on this quest for the ultimate drink of the gods, but Lo thought that was just a myth. He even told her to chill out about it, saying there's a ton of other awesome stuff out there. But she was obsessed, because the taste of that drink unlocked memories. His name is Shen Tian, and he wasn't always this hooked, but his mentor was really into it and kept pushing him to try his own concoctions. He was an alchemist, teaching Tian his craft, and he was trying to invent the drink of the gods. He actually nailed it once, but the ingredients were crazy hard to get. The student took a sip and just froze. The flavor was totally unexpected. Tian even dropped his cup, and his mentor chewed him out for wasting such a valuable drink. That's why he figured the kid was still green, didn't know a real treasure when he saw one. Still, he wasn't mad at the young punk. A drinking buddy's always easy to find. Anyway, the master was planning a trip west, and Tian begged to tag along. He even promised to train harder, just to get to go. Before long, Tian packed his stuff for the trip, just his own gear. He wasn't about to wait on the old man this time, figured he could handle himself. Then, out of nowhere, the master announced the trip was off. Seems he got orders to report to the palace, ASAP. Shin figured they were gonna ask him to cook up some seriously dangerous stuff again. But the master told him not to sweat it, promised he'd be back soon. While he's gone, he told his student to keep up with his studies. Turns out, meeting the emperor wasn't as harmless as we thought. His Majesty's asked the alchemist to work for him, like, a bunch of times. The master was poisoned, and the emperor was even willing to give him the antidote if he agreed. But the alchemist stubbornly refused, saying alchemy isn't a weapon to hurt people. Standing before the emperor, face busted and bloody, he insisted that even soldiers are people. He was even willing to die rather than let the emperor use his skills for tyranny. But that just made the evil ruler laugh. He even liked the alchemist's courage. He just didn't see the point of it if he wasn't on his side. And since the master turned down his generosity, he's got no place in the empire anymore. The emperor banished him and everyone connected to him, for good. And if he somehow manages to survive, no one's gonna lift a finger to help him. But if he comes crawling back begging for mercy, they'll kill him without a second thought. So, the exhausted alchemist and his apprentice reached the border, and Shin promised to find an antidote, even though he knew he might be too late, 'cause the master had lost way too much blood. With his last bit of strength, the alchemist asked his apprentice to remember that elixir of the gods. He wanted to taste it just one more time when they made it out west. And for himself, he asked him to buy something tasty, something that would scratch his childhood cravings. Feeling death's cold grip, The master just apologized for not being able to go any further. And now, here in this rundown shack, Shin Tian was just as obsessed with finding that elixir. His so-called babysitter knew he needed a distraction, pronto. So, he tossed him a small box, told him to open it, said the booze could wait. The owner of the guest house asked me to give you this, said some big shot sent it. The student was worried his mentor had gone off the rails and gotten into trouble. He was freaking out, because if Tian kept acting like that, he'd get deported, no doubt. Ignoring the student's pleas, Shin opened the package and saw a fancy-looking bottle with an envelope. Examining the bottle suspiciously, he hoped it wasn't, something bad. But looking closer at the liquid's color, it seemed really familiar to him. Then, he started reading the letter, and it contained some serious intel. His face changed instantly, and he ordered Lu, who was holding the cat, to pack their bags, like, now. I don't know where Tian even got the strength, but today's a huge day for him. Last night, he had a dream where he met his old mentor again. The mentor offered him a drink, telling him to be careful not to spill it. This special liquor was made from ingredients that only grow out west. At first, Shin Tian was stoked to see his mentor and rushed in for a hug. He asked about his health, how his trip was, if it was too rough on him. But then he realized it was just a dream, though he was still happy for the visit. He wanted to tell his teacher so much, but he didn't know where to start. Besides, not all his news was good. Things were actually pretty messed up. The guy admitted he was struggling, and there wasn't anything out west to remind him of his master. Sin Kaken burned all his portraits, and nobody here knows anything about alchemy. That's why nobody knows about the master alchemist's achievements. But Tian's the only one who still honors his mentor's memory in this world. Except he's starting to forget what the master even looked like he never existed. That's why Tian needed a taste of the alcohol his mentor used to give him. That's where the dream ended, and Shin woke up staring at an unfamiliar ceiling. He looked around. The room was totally new to him, and seriously decked out. Then he heard a girl's voice, which at first sounded like an echo. Kanemia was standing next to him, asking how he was feeling. A few hours before, she'd gone out onto the balcony, feeling kinda bummed and worn out. It's been almost 2 weeks since they started making moves. The vassals were ready to throw all their money at it to keep the temple open. But Kanemia took a different route, alchemy from the eastern continent. It's a unique medical system where alchemy replaces divine power. This science helps heal a ton of people quickly with potions. That's why it's getting so popular, and Kanemia decided to hire alchemists. The Western alchemists were exiled immigrants from the East, working in the shadows. So finding them was tough, but Kanemia managed to get one on board. He's supposed to be a total genius, but the maid had some doubts about their skills. Just then, a blonde guy walked in, dragging a body with long, dark hair. His eyes were wild and glazed over, and his voice, all hoarse, just kept begging for booze. Kanemia was straight up horrified. These guests were the total opposite of what she expected. Fighting back the creep out, the girl gave him what he wanted, and when he woke up, he looked totally fine. He's young and not even puffy, even though they say he drinks anything and everything, trying to find that one flavor. The dude who dragged him here was sitting nearby, but he looked so messed up she didn't even want to make eye contact. Right now, all she cares about is making a good impression on Shin Taeyeon, so she politely introduced herself. The guy just grunted, not understanding what this little kid wanted from him. But then he realized this was the girl who sent him the box. Kanemia started by saying that everyone considers him the best alchemist on the eastern continent. Taeyeon was stoked his fame had reached the west. Guess he's kind of a big deal. He's a cut above the rest, a real standout, which is why Kanemia wants his skills. Then she confessed she wants to set up an alchemy lab. Tian thought the idea was solid, but pointed out they'd need a ton of alchemists. Kanemia told him not to sweat it, promising to provide everything they needed and pay them well. Still, it made the guest uneasy, since alchemists are seen as dabblers in dark arts back west. And if this girl's willing to protect them despite the church's opposition, that's a bold move. Plus, the offer itself seemed pretty damn generous. And she hasn't even hinted at what he really wants. Getting too greedy can definitely backfire, but Tian figured it was better to take the offer. Just as he was about to agree, Lu leaned forward, announcing they were in. He even called the girl a fairy, and she thought that comparison was kinda weird. Tian suddenly realized why his assistant was staring like that and jumped in to explain himself. Dude's a big beefy guy, but he's a total sucker for anything cute and cuddly. Still, Shin chewed him out for sticking his nose where it didn't belong. But the guy didn't get what the problem was. The offer's great, and the old man needs a job. If he gets busy, he'll stop dwelling on the past and start living in the moment. The kid had a point, but the master wasn't happy about him running his mouth. Just then, Kinemia cut them off, yelling that she was still standing right there. Then she asked Tien if he was interested in that alcohol recipe she sent him. It's the recipe for that drink of the gods, and the Archduchess is willing to hand it over. Hearing that his deepest desire was practically within reach, Shin was practically drooling. But to get it, he'd have to sign a lifetime contract with the Lion family. When she laid that out, a heavy silence fell. The alchemist was a little thrown by the offer of a contract for life, and before making such a huge decision, he wanted to go over a few things. First off, he was curious how the Archduchess knew he was looking for the ambrosia. He also wanted to know how she'd prove her recipe was legit. It wasn't hard for a girl to find out. Every tavern's buzzing about some drunk looking for the ambrosia. As for the recipe, she didn't know if it was real, and Tien could test it himself. Kinemia's grandpa traveled a lot when he was younger. I hit up a ton of countries with crazy different cultures, writing it all down in my journal. The princess practically grew up on those stories. So when she heard Tien was hunting for the nectar of the gods, one story popped into her head. It was about an alchemist from the eastern continent who wanted to treat his apprentice to the ultimate drink. Once he had all the ingredients, he headed over to his apprentice, grinning ear to ear. This story wasn't just familiar to Tien, it was about his mentor. He couldn't believe he was hearing about him from someone else. The journal also had the recipe for the drink that Kinemia sent to Tien. Now she was asking if that was the drink he was searching for. It had a sharp, fiery taste and a heavy, all-encompassing feeling. A taste of honey in the woods, rich with an unmatched aroma. This was the unforgettable flavor, the one the master had once let his student try. And Tien admitted it was the very drink he'd always been searching for. Shin can't go back home. There's nobody waiting for him there. But here, there's someone who wants to use his master's knowledge to help people. And that gives him a chance to leave the master's mark on this world, to make him famous again. That was a pretty solid argument, and without hesitating, he asked where to sign up. And right on cue, Lu gently grabbed her cute little hand and asked her to take good care of his master. But the next moment, he teleported away somewhere, leaving only a cat jumping off his shoulder. No sooner had he vanished than Kinemia's bodyguard appeared in the room. The kid heard the mistress was having guests and came to check if everything was cool. Then he confessed that he was the one who teleported that thug who dared to lay a hand on her. The guy gave him bad vibes, so he shipped him off to the forbidden monster forest on the west side of the continent. Kinemia flipped out and demanded he bring him back, ASAP. Ayan obeyed, and Lo reappeared in the room, covered in blood and looking totally wrecked. The dude, of course, assured the girl he was fine, even though he looked anything but. Kinemia told Ayan not to do that again. He agreed, and Lo noticed something. That kid's eyes. They're full of bloodlust, like some psycho even worse than Shinkaken. After the chat, the Archduchess let the guests go get some rest. And later, she was stoked that she'd managed to snag Shin Tien. She got lucky that she stumbled across her grandpa's journal. Otherwise, she would have been screwed. In that notebook, she found the story of Shin Tien and his mentor. It even felt weird to her that she remembered the journal the second she glanced at the bookshelf. It was like someone was deliberately putting it right in front of her face. Before long, the building that used to be a temple started filling up with people. And these weren't just any people. They were alchemists from all over the eastern continent. Word got around that the young Archduchess had transformed the temple into an alchemical complex. The building got a major makeover, and the complex even got a name, Hemenwon. When everyone gathered in the spacious hall, Kinemia announced a demonstration of her potions. For this, she asked if any of the injured would be willing to come forward. A lot of the sick folks had their doubts, but Tien swore up and down that the potion was the cure. Then he slapped some of the stuff on the wound, so fast the poor guy almost had a heart attack. He was ready to kick the bucket from some kind of voodoo, but then he starts feeling the pain fade away. The wound just started healing right before their eyes, and a lot of them thought it was a miracle. When they started asking what kind of medicine it was, Tien just called it Quick Heal Potion. While everyone was busy with that, Kinemia took off on a different mission. After plotting something out, she quickly found her bodyguard. He wasn't planning on going far anyway, and she asked him to come with her. Her plan was pretty chill. She wanted to heal his wound now. This wasn't exactly in Ayan's playbook, but he couldn't exactly say no at this point. A group of alchemists greeted her in the hall, always eager to be at her service. They immediately started offering her healing candies, but that wasn't what the girl was there for. She wanted to heal her friend's wound, which was inflicted by magic. The alchemist agreed, but first, they asked the boy to show them his wound. As soon as he saw Ian's stomach, he was immediately taken aback. But then, the boy's voice echoed in his head, starting to put ideas there. Don't show any surprise, and if he tries anything funny, he'll pay the ultimate price. The alchemist has to say the wound isn't healing because of a curse and can't be cured. Seeing how inflamed the wound was, the man was even more convinced by the rumors that a maniac was protecting the girl. Besides, it's obvious the boy wounded himself, which is just plain stupid. Publicly admitting he couldn't heal the wound, that's a straight-up gut punch to his alchemist pride. Plus, it was the perfect shot to impress the little fairy. No way he's ditching his alchemist pride because some punk's throwing threats around. But that voice in his head promised to end him in a heartbeat if he refused. Kinemia was standing right there, waiting for an answer, totally hopeful. So the guy, who values his life above all else, announced that potions just wouldn't cut it for this wound. Ajane, for one, was glad the alchemist wasn't being a pain in the butt. Because it wasn't time to heal the wound yet, he still didn't know everything about Kinemia. All he knew was that she had no magic, and she was pretty damn good with a sword. And that this girl was often vulnerable in the mornings. It's like, she's got a thing for cute, fluffy animals, 'cause they remind her of herself or something. But Kinemia keeps Ian at arm's length, though she's friendly with everyone else. The young Archduchess is always smiling at everyone except him. Suddenly, the kid realized it was seriously getting on his nerves. Just then, they heard Lu's voice. He was rushing towards them. He sensed this incredible vibe coming from near the cat, and figuring out it was from the fairy, he had to check it out. Ian, meanwhile, was silently fuming that this dude showed up again. He didn't know what the guy wanted, but he felt this urge to kick him out, like, now. Immediately, electric blasts shot at Lu, like lightning trying to strike its target. But Lu spotted the danger just in time and dodged it. The kid was totally freaked out and started plotting how to ditch him for good. It all happened so fast, Kinemia didn't even notice and just asked where the kitty was. Lo left him in the room. The fluffball loved the new digs and crashed out. Meanwhile, Ian was busy trying to figure out how Lo dodged him. Only top-tier warriors can pull that off. Another mystery got added to his list. He was dying to know who this guy was, who was just then telling the Archduchess he had a gift for her. He knitted a cute little hat with ears, which the girl immediately tried on. It's soft and warm, but Kinemia's curious why Lo decided to give her this. The weather's getting colder, and he didn't want the young lady catching a chill. The girl loved the gift, especially since it was handmade. Ian was seething seeing her smile at that dude and not him. He also couldn't figure out why she thought that stupid hat was cute. I mean, it's just a knitted piece of wool stuck on his head. All these little things, even the insignificant ones, just kept fueling Ahyan's rage. Right then, Lo promised the fairy he'd knit her something new every single day, and he was so stoked she liked it, he even lifted her up, which totally set Ahyan off. He promised Kinemia he wouldn't hit him, so he waited till she looked away, and used magic to tie Lo into a pretzel. But Tien saw it all and just figured the kid was a total psycho. He was just chilling in the sun when this old lady came up to him. The old woman works at the shop and came to thank the alchemist. She's super grateful to him and his mentor for opening Hemenwan. She didn't know Tien's teacher personally, but she'd heard plenty about him, just like every alchemist. She used to be a respected alchemist herself, back in her cozy little village. When she first came to the Western continent, she couldn't speak or read a word, and felt totally useless. But then she heard about Hemenwan opening, and started processing herbs and making medicine. Seeing that it helped people, the woman didn't feel so worthless anymore. Now she can help people, and that's why she's thankful to Tien. And also to his mentor, who raised him to be such a great master. That's how Shin realized he wasn't the only one who remembered his mentor. He was so pleased that even the cheap booze tasted amazing tonight. For a split second, he could almost feel his mentor's spirit right there beside him. It was some time ago, when a massive downpour hit the continent. A battle went down in one of the castles, leaving only two standing, one of them being Ian. The other was Leon, who begged to be killed out of desperation, but the kid refused. Figuring this guy didn't deserve an easy out, he moved closer, just piling on the dread. This very same dude, Leon, actually managed to wound Ian, hoping to take him out. So, the little mage decided to teach him a lesson, to make the fool realize how arrogant he was. With pure terror on his face, the warrior couldn't imagine anything worse than death, and with one swift move, without even blinking, the little mage plucked out his eye. What's worse, he even chuckled, trying to humiliate the warrior even more. He wanted Leon to look at that empty eye socket every time. And remember this day, it was Ian's payback for the wound in his side. He even demanded Leon be grateful he let him live. Scenes from that past kept haunting Leon's nightmares. Every time after a dream like that, he'd wake up screaming, drenched in cold sweat. And every time, he swore he'd find Ian Kratz and make him pay. Leon vowed to find everything Ian held dear and tear it all down, make him regret everything. This winter was brutal, and in the Kaneem castle, they were burning through magic stones to keep warm. It helped a little, but the cold was still intense. For some reason, the girl was freezing, and the nanny worried they'd run out of stones way too soon. Kanemia wasn't sweating it. They could always buy more, since the slime craze was still going strong. Still, she couldn't figure out why magic stones were getting so expensive, with dungeons popping up all the time. Turns out, not every guild's got what it takes to clear those dungeons. The little one noticed her nanny was holding back and started demanding answers. That's when she confessed that Count Duran Hub was jacking up the prices just for them. He's still got a bone to pick about what went down years ago. His uncle got the axe, fair or not. And Kanemia started thinking about mining the magic stones herself. That thought kept her tossing and turning for ages before she finally crashed. The next day, she called a snap meeting and laid it all out for her vassals. A list of dungeons she wanted to acquire, assuring them it wasn't just a whim. Okay, so one of the dungeons is monster-free and you can't mine magic stones there. But Kanemia still thought it was worth buying. Even though you can't get stones there, it's loaded with mithril. Nobody knows about that yet. Kanemia knows it from the novel, and the price is gonna skyrocket down the line. The purchase was made. Now all that was left was finding a guild willing to clear the dungeon. The girl totally forgot about finding a guild, cause she got super into the dungeons themselves. Guilds are hard to come by these days. It all started a few years back, when the leader of the Black Knight Guild announced he was stepping down. The guild members followed him, and it triggered a full-on guild crisis. So Kanemia tasked her vassals with finding a guild, and they jumped on it. The problem is, a lot of shady guilds started popping up. We've been seeing a lot of scams lately, warriors grabbing the stones and just vanishing. There are hardly any trustworthy guilds around, and Kanemia doesn't have the connections to find a solid one. Tien noticed she was down in the dumps and asked her what was bugging her. The kid figured he needed a drink, but booze for him is like the opposite of medicine. He doesn't even care his sidekick's gonna flip out. Shin's gonna have gray hair soon because of him. Suddenly, he spotted Lo, who looked like he'd had another incident with the chemicals. Tien wasn't even surprised, knowing the guy was probably trying to do his own thing again. Then he turned to the little girl and asked her for a small favor, which was to find Lo a decent job before he screws everything up around here, you know? Lo was Tien's student, but he could see that alchemy just wasn't the right fit for him. The girl was racking her brain, trying to figure out what she could even get for him, since he's Kshan. And then it hit her. This was Kshan Law himself, from the Black Knight Guild. Kanemia practically shouted, and Tien realized she knew who he was. And she did, because the rumors were that Kshan was the one who ran that guild. The young lady couldn't believe this mountain of a man, who loved cats, was the head of the guild. Later, a teacher flew to Ayan with the news that Leon was allowed to return to his duties. The guy just nodded without looking up, continuing what he was doing. The teacher reminded him that Leon was ambitious, and there was no telling what he might pull. So he couldn't relax, but Ayan argued that Leon wasn't even in his league. Still, he knew Leon would fight tooth and nail, and that really ticked him off. Kratz is probably about to have his second awakening soon, judging by how his joints are aching. Suddenly, the teacher wanted to know what the student was up to, thinking he was building some kind of cursed contraption. Turns out, the kid just decided to take up knitting, and he was actually pretty good at it. Even the teacher was impressed. When asked why he was doing it, Ayan explained that he was just bored. The truth is, he remembers how Kanemi liked a handmade gift. For some reason, the guy keeps thinking about it, and it's really getting on his nerves. Now about the Kshans, who are descendants of the desert. They also possess incredible physical strength and fighting skills. They moved to the Empire after their oasis dried up and formed the Black Knight Fighting Guild. This guild blew up fast, thanks to how well they crushed every job. But then, out of nowhere, their leader hung up his sword, and the guild just vanished. And that Black Knight leader is now knitting frickin' doilies for Kanemia. Dude's got skills, though, like he was born with knitting needles in his hands. Still, it bummed out the young Archduchess to think the strongest swordsman just quit fighting. She was dying to know why this cat lover ditched the guild. Rumor has it, his favorite sword, his soul, just snapped. It's the legendary Tuyen Desert Blade, and Kshan's soul was tied to that sword. So when it broke, Kshan lost his mojo and couldn't fight anymore. Tien thinks that's bull, because a real master doesn't blame his tools for anything. Even though Law says he's done with fighting, he can't take his eyes off the knights' training. He's staring at them with this wide-eyed look, like a little kid. After talking with the alchemist, Kanemia went to have a chat with Law, and she asked him if he'd ever considered picking up a sword again. That question was a real surprise for the guy, especially coming from a kid. He figured her teacher put her up to it, trying to talk him into it. The girl relayed Tien's story about the broken sword and the lost spirit. But as a swordswoman herself, she's sure Law can fight again, holding a sword. She's convinced he just hasn't found the right one yet, and promised to make a sword for him. But Tuyen is the sword, the one the Kashan leaders went through countless battles with, and nothing compares. This is his battle buddy, the one that holds the history and soul of Kshain. And Kanemia promised she'd forge a sword that would surpass Tuyen in every way. Still, her confident tone didn't convince Lo. He thought it was impossible. Either way, the Archduchess will make it happen, but it seemed to her like the guy just didn't want it. She also noticed that, just like Tien said, Lo was incredibly stubborn. And to get this hardhead to agree to take the sword, she challenged him to a duel. But by the law of the desert, once a challenge is thrown down, you can't back out of the fight. Lo assured her she couldn't beat him, but the girl had faith in herself, especially since she believes in the ones who'll forge a better sword than Tuyen. However, when she went to the blacksmith sisters, they doubted anyone could even pull that off. Up until now, the girls were doubting their skills were up to the task. That's when Kanemia presented them with a crate of massive mithril chunks. The sisters were blown away. They'd never seen anything like it. The girl explained where it came from and asked them to experiment, to try forging a sword. Now, the sisters are feeling a little more confident. They're digging, trying something new. Especially since the material's so cool, they're totally down to get to work. Suddenly, Kanemia's attention was caught by something they had. Bracelets they'd made for the Harvest Festival, as a gift for anyone who bought slimes. Lana promised to make more if the little Archduchess wanted to give them to her friends. The girl suddenly got to thinking about friends and asked them to make bracelets in different colors. When she heard the word friend, Kainemia's mind immediately went to Ian for some reason. It was for him that she'd asked for the bracelet to be made, and she really hoped he'd like it. She was also kind of worried he'd just chuck it out the window, like he did last time. Walking down the hall, she spotted him coming out of his room. She freaked and ducked behind a pillar, even though there was nothing to be scared of. She just felt awkward giving him a gift after all the stuff that had gone down. And while she was trying to figure out how to give him the gift, Ian suddenly appeared right behind her. She jumped so hard, her face twisted up, and she lost her grip on the present. The box hit the floor and popped open, spilling the bracelet out. Noticing the trinket, Ian bent down himself to get a closer look. That's when it hit him. Today was the Harvest Festival, and these bracelets were given to friends in celebration. Ian's first thought was that Kanemia got the bracelet from that ape. That's what he called him anyway. The Archduchess was indignant, but then explained she was bringing the gift for Ian. The fact that Kanemia decided to get him a gift caught the kid off guard. After all, you usually only give gifts like that to friends, which they definitely weren't. But the girl genuinely wanted to give the bracelet to her bodyguard. The kid's hair practically stood on end, and he was totally speechless. Not understanding why he was quiet, Kanemia figured he didn't like it and told him he could toss it. But then, Ian suddenly blurted out that he really liked it and wanted to keep it. Now, she was the one who was shocked. This usually grumpy dude was actually happy about the trinket. She was still happy he accepted the gift and helped him put the bracelet on. They chatted for a bit and realized it was the first time either of them had a friend. The maids were watching them the whole time, practically bawling like they were watching some cheesy soap opera. Nanny Vanessa was there too, and when they called her over, she couldn't even walk. She was crying so hard she couldn't see. Wiping the tears from her eyes, she finally looked where they were pointing. There was a butterfly fluttering around, which was super weird since it's winter. After some time, the day of the duel arrived, and Law showed up ready for a fight. Kanemia noticed how brave he looked and hoped her plan would work. But then Ian came up to her and offered to help, thinking she wanted to off Law. The girl told him not to think like that and asked how he was feeling. And the dude said he was feeling way better, especially after getting the bracelet. Still, he was kinda curious about what his young mistress was planning. She didn't spill the beans right away, but told him to just watch and see. Stepping closer to the center of the arena, she was ready for the duel, just like Law. In her hands was the bonsod sword, made by the Behemoth sisters. Looking at it, the guy thought it was pretty decent, but not as good as Tuyen. The Archduchess knew he'd say that, but told him to give it a shot anyway, and promised that this sword would turn out way better than Tuyen ever was. It only just clicked for Law that this was the weapon Kanemia promised to make. It's got a beautiful shimmer, and the blade's so sharp, you can see how keen it is even from here. The hilt on this thing? Master craftsmanship, pure class. You can practically feel the good vibes radiating off it. Lo admitted it was a decent sword, but even that wasn't a guaranteed win. Right now, he was more worried about Kanemia being so small and fragile. The girl just snapped that he was trying to bore her to death and told him to get on with the fight. She wants to show this warrior just how awesome this new sword is after all. She sounded confident, but the guy already knew how this was going to play out. 3 hits without using aura is the deal, but she'll probably be down after the first. Still, he decided to hold back, didn't want to hurt her. And while he was strategizing, the Archduchess just straight up charged him. Her attack actually packed a punch, but what surprised Lo was how durable her sword really was. Kanemia swung at her opponent again, daring him to fight, but he dodged, and the Archduchess flew past him, though she managed to clip his sword. The next instant, half the blade of his weapon clattered to the floor, and the warrior was left holding only the hilt, with a jagged piece attached. His hands actually trembled a little when he saw that the sword was broken. The guy was surprised that the girl's sword was so strong, and she explained that it was made of a new metal, nephril. Now she asked again if he thought this sword was better than Tuyen's. Lo admitted defeat. Kanemia had completely shattered his preconceptions. Then he started apologizing to her, realizing he'd been wrong. She didn't just accept his apology, though. Only if he takes this sword. She also asked him to help rebuild the Black Knight Guild and become a member of the Lion family. Lo doubted he was worthy. He felt ashamed in front of the comrades who left the guild because of him. Still, his eyes lit up at the sight of the sword, just like Tien's did when he entered Hemenwan. Kanemia understood how hard it was for him to lose Tuyen, who was like a brother in arms. Still, she's sure Tuyen would be happy to see his master holding a sword again. He'd also be glad that Lo made a new friend, who isn't meant to replace the old one at all. The girl is certain that Lo still cherishes the memory of Tuyen. And then the warrior knelt before the Archduchess and swore an oath to serve her faithfully, carrying out all her commands. When she heard him swear by the oasis, Kanemia was surprised, because that's a swordsman's oath, which means a lifelong vow of loyalty, even a willingness to die for her. Thinking the lady was rejecting his oath, the guy was ready to kick the bucket right then and there. In his mind, that's what Tuyen would have done if he'd heard her words. Tuyen is a really loyal sword, and he's hard to handle at first. But if you trust him, he'll give all his power for his master. That's what Lo wants to be for Kanemia, and he's ready to give his strength and his life to his young mistress. Otherwise, he's got nothing left but to die, and he put the broken sword piece back to his neck. The girl told him not to do it and agreed to accept the oath, even though it felt like blackmail. But handing him a new weapon, she asked Lokshena to become her sword. Taking it, the guy bowed his head humbly before the young lady, repeating his oath. After that, she sent him to rest, since he's got a ton of work tomorrow. She was stoked, though, having snagged a combat guild. She'd be rolling in dough in no time. Then she checked in on Ayan, noticing he was super quiet today. She wanted to brag about how brilliant she was, but she froze right up. The kid was lying curled up in a ball on the floor, totally unresponsive. After she freaked out, they moved him to his room, and Kanemia kept watch by his bed. She also ordered them to find Tien ASAP, hoping he was sober for once. He showed up pretty quick, actually looking normal, but totally worried. Seeing the boy, he asked what was wrong, but the girl had no clue what was up with him. But she asked me to check out the wound on his side, said it just wouldn't heal. She made it clear right away that potions wouldn't do the trick, since it was caused by magic. But then she spotted something herself when the alchemist lifted his shirt, and she froze. Ayan's wound was completely healed, just a dark mark left behind. And Tien realized he'd been tearing it open himself, over and over, hurting himself on purpose. The girl still couldn't figure out why anyone would do something so messed up, and she remembered letting him be her bodyguard until his wound healed. Now it was clear to her that he was doing it on purpose, just to stay close to her. Tien examined the patient and said he didn't pass out because of the wound, to which Kanemia added that he'd also been complaining about headaches a lot. He also mentioned aching joints, and the alchemist knew right then that Ian was starting his second awakening. That's when your magical power spikes like crazy. His body can't handle the strain, but but it's pretty normal for mages to get sick like this. With that, Tien finished his examination and went to brew a restorative potion for Aeon. The young Archduchess thanked him and stayed by her friend's side. She kept thinking about him ripping open his wound, scared she'd kick him out later. Not long after, the girl noticed something weird. In his delirium, the kid started counting down from 100. At first, Kinemia couldn't figure out what it meant, but then she remembered his story, how his father made him count to 100, then just dumped him in the woods. With each number he counted down, the Archduchess flinched. Taking his hand and not knowing if he could hear her, she reassured him that everything was going to be all right. And leaning her head on his shoulder, she promised she'd never leave him. Meanwhile, Ian was dreaming about the day he was abandoned. And when he counted down to 1, he snapped awake and cracked open his eyes. He had this dream pretty often, but the kid didn't know why it kept haunting him. He always felt like no matter how much he counted, he'd always end up alone. Sitting up, he suddenly noticed something else in the bed with him. Something alive. He lifted the blanket and saw Kinemia curled up in a ball. She was sound asleep after all the excitement, and he reached out to wake her. It felt like a dream, but a damn good one. Feeling a touch, the girl's eyes snapped open, and she jumped back when she saw Ian was awake. She started firing questions about how he was feeling, but he told her he was fine. The guy wanted to ask something, but Kinemia suddenly threw her arms around him. She kept saying how scared she was when she found him passed out on the floor. Then she started asking why he didn't tell her about the second awakening, which is supposed to be a real pain. Ian tried to calm her down, saying it was nothing to him, just like catching a cold. Still, he was happy to know she'd been taking care of him all night. And she wasn't doing it out of guilt, but because she was really worried. Now she told him to let her know right away if anything started hurting again. And she promised to take care of him, even if he just had a headache. Then she was going to call the alchemist to give him another once-over. She also wanted to fix him something to eat, but Ian stopped her and asked her to just hang out with him a little longer. He wasn't just saying it, you could see it in his eyes, all tired and longing. Kinemia was still a little worried he wasn't feeling well, but she agreed to stay. And a little while later, another guest showed up to see the young Archduchess. It was the head of the magic tower himself, showing up after hearing about the incident with the boy. They told him about Aeon, that he was doing better, and had asked the lady to stay with him a while. But the guest didn't have to wait long. Kinemia came out to see him soon after. She couldn't believe the king of mages and master of the magic tower was actually visiting her. He's got the power of an emperor, maybe even more, but he stays neutral in everything. He's no spring chicken, but damn, he looks surprisingly young. Kinemia was a little nervous. She wanted everything to go perfectly, so she immediately reported that she was doing everything possible for Aeon to get better soon. But the head of the tower explained that there was no need to worry, and a second awakening couldn't destroy a mage. The lady of the manor invited the guest to the table and sat down across from him, when suddenly he asked her to sit closer, right next to him. This surprised the girl a little, but she happily complied with his request. Then she ordered tea to be brought, first asking about the head of the tower's preferences. He wanted to sort things out with communication first, and asked her to just call him Grandpa, especially since he'd always dreamed of having a granddaughter, and he'd be stoked to be friends with such a cutie. Kinemia was a little nervous. I mean, he's the tower master, but she shyly called him what he asked. The guy practically melted and couldn't hold back a tear of joy. He was super happy to see just how sweet this little one was. Before, he could only see her from afar in her bird form. And now she seems like a pretty mature and well-mannered girl to him. Plus, thanks to her, Ion's been acting more like a human. And now the Tower Master confessed that he has a favor to ask of the young Archduchess. He wants to keep an eye on Ion for a few days, and Kinemia agreed to let him stay at the castle for a bit. Meanwhile, somewhere else, in rooms lit by creepy, flickering lights, One-Eyed Leon was seeing red, and he was taking it out on the wall with his fists. He was furious that magic had no effect on this girl, and he couldn't figure out what she was. He even thought Ian was messing with him, but he found out that Kinemia is super important to him. And to bring his wicked scheme to life, Leon decided to try a different approach. He conjured up a butterfly and ordered it to gather his mages, the ones who could buy him some time. And he demanded they bring him hair from someone who's really close to the young Archduchess. That person is her nanny, Vanessa, who that butterfly already paid a little visit to before. A little later, Ian was feeling better, and he asked Kinemia to go for a walk with him. The girl was a little worried if it wasn't too soon for him to be going out, but he assured her he was fine. He just didn't get why she chose such a weird outfit for a walk. Today was the Day of the Dead, and everyone dressed up so the spirits could rest easy. Kinemia picked out an outfit that would go well with her friend's clothes. Their costumes were supposed to be cute little vampires, and Ayan froze when he saw how she looked. The Behemoth sisters were totally charmed by her appearance too. Even though it was a vampire costume, she looked unbelievably adorable. She even practiced demanding candy, or else she'd bite everyone. And the sisters were so touched. They immediately gave her candy and even asked her to bite them. Then Kinemia explained to Ayan how to scare people into giving them candy. The boy repeated the line, and it sounded seriously menacing coming from him. But everyone knew it was all in good fun, so they played along with him, just like they did with the young mistress. Then Lana confessed that she had another gift for Kinemia. She and her sister had forged an incredibly beautiful dagger for her. It's made from leftover mithril, and the sisters decided to thank her that way. It's also decorated with precious stones, so it can be worn as a pendant. After visiting Behemoth's shop, the girl had a whole basket full of sweets. And then, out of nowhere, Ayan added his own candy on top, the ones he'd gotten. He just wanted to give them to her because Kinemia looks so cute. The Archduchess decided to take these candies to Hemenwan and invited her friend to come along. But he noticed flashes of electrical discharge in the sky and knew what it was. After that, he asked Kinemia to go first, explaining he had some things to take care of. Then, with a sly grin, he told her to try and stay out of trouble while he was gone. He leaned in so close, it made the girl feel all awkward and flustered. Still, she promised there wouldn't be any problems, and they said their goodbyes. And on the way to Hemenwan, she kept wondering what kind of business he could have. A little later, walking into the building, the kids started looking for Vanessa, but she wasn't answering. She found the nanny in one of the halls, standing with her back to her at a table. Hearing the girl's voice, Vanessa turned around, looking suspiciously calm somehow. Kinemia showed her the basket of candy and explained that she wanted to leave it there. Suddenly, the nanny grabbed her hands and said they were freezing cold. The girl was a little lost, but the nanny's hands felt colder. Vanessa offered her some tea too, but she refused, wanting to wait for Ian first. But the nanny insisted she drink it before it got cold and started pouring it into a cup. That's when the young Archduchess noticed that this woman was acting really weird. She asked if she was okay, but the nanny just kept pouring tea like she was in a trance, spilling boiling water all over her hands. For a second, she glanced at the girl and quietly told her to run. Get out of here now. The girl got seriously spooked. Even with the party, the nanny's behavior was super unsettling. Vanessa also tried to warn the little one not to drink the tea. But before she could finish, her face twisted back into that dead smile, and she started begging her to drink the tea again. Kinemia was now positive something messed up was going on, and she needed to act fast. She couldn't do anything on her own, so she took the nanny's advice and bolted. She was rushing to find Ian, and Vanessa was yelling after her to stop, promising her a cup of tea and swearing it wasn't poison. Then suddenly, the nanny's voice changed, got all rough, and seemed to be coming from everywhere. The voice threatened that if Kinemia didn't drink it, he'd off the woman, who already had a knife to her throat. The girl noticed a butterfly near Vanessa and realized it was controlling the nanny. She also figured out someone was behind this, and that the cup wasn't really poisoned. Because if this creep wanted her dead, he'd just straight up shank her. Ian's warning to not screw things up kept ringing in Kinemia's head. But right now, she decided to trust her gut and agreed to drink the tea, hoping that, if things went south, the nanny would somehow snap out of it. She took the cup from her. Meanwhile, Ian headed into the thick of the woods, sensing something was off. Turns out, there were a couple of guys there, and he took care of them right away. One of them was Leon's brother, and his attempt to attack the kid ended in a total wipeout. It looked like he was out for revenge for his brother. But Ian was almost disappointed that this opponent gave up so easily. The guy didn't even fight back, and when he got his face shoved in the dirt, he called the kid a monster. It sounded familiar, and he knew for sure this dude was Leon's brother. He said the same thing when he attacked, called him a monster too. The stunned guy just kept lying there on the ground, muttering something under his breath. Ian thought it was kind of weird, because he hadn't even hit him that hard. They could have easily gotten up and come at him again, but they were just laying there. It was like they were just stalling for something. He looked back up at the villain staring down, now just chuckling to himself. The young mage realized it was all just a distraction, and the real danger was actually headed for the Archduchess. He pinned the guy down harder, demanding to know what they'd done to Kinemia. The dude just smirked real nasty and hissed through his teeth that it was too late. Just then, a bell started ringing, breaking the silence all around. And the kid got scared that something bad really had happened to Kanemia. After a little while, the young Archduchess opened her eyes. She'd lost consciousness almost immediately after drinking that tea. Now she was in a strange place, damp and cold, and her little hands were tightly bound with a massive chain. The door creaked open, and out of the corner of her eye, she saw someone entering. It was Leon, who was clearly itching to see her wake up. The girl didn't know this guy, but right now she was more worried about Vanessa. Realizing which woman she meant, Leon said she was sleeping peacefully back at the estate. Then Kanemia started asking what he wanted, promising she'd give him anything he asked for. But a noble archmage like him had no need for such things. That's when he realized young Ian hadn't told her anything about mages. Now the girl was starting to get it. She'd been snatched to get back at Ian. And he suddenly admitted how that kid thought he wasn't even worth a simple death. Because of that, he'd been waiting for this moment and wasn't planning on making her demise quick. Seeing him grab his special tools, Kanemia started racking her brain for a way to escape, which was basically impossible right now, seeing as she was all tied up. Then she remembered the pendant and hoped it could break the chains. But there was another problem. The bad guy was way too close. And if she started cutting the chains, he might hear. The girl started begging for his forgiveness, admitting she was wrong. Putting on a show of sobs and fear, she started begging him for mercy. But Leon told her to shut her yap, said her blubbering was getting on his nerves. But the girl kept pleading, using it to drown out the sound of the chains being cut. And the creep told her to blame it all on Ian, calling him a real piece of work. Just then, her chains snapped. She needed to move fast and smart. Seeing what happened, the guy was totally blindsided. Next thing he knew, the girl slashed him with a dagger, trying to make a break for it. She got him right in the empty eye socket. The pain was off the charts. Not waiting for him to recover, Kanemia sliced through the chains on her legs. Even though Leon was writhing in agony, he still reached for the prisoner. But then she stabbed him in the leg with a dagger, messing up his tendons. That was the opening he needed to haul ass out of there. Kanemia was almost at the door when Leon used his magic, and fire erupted right in front of her, hotter than hell itself. Still, she jumped over it, and Leon created a swarm of butterflies, ordering them to find that girl immediately and bring her back. The young Archduchess noticed the winged chase behind her and knew she needed to find a hiding place, fast. And as she ran, that sinister voice echoed after her, insisting she couldn't escape. He threatened to end her right then and there when he found her, and Kanemia prayed Ian would show up quickly. Leon, meanwhile, bleeding out and cursing, kept creating more butterflies. He was barking orders, telling them to find the Archduchess, and cursing them out for not being able to find one kid. He was so pissed now, he was thinking about just wiping everyone out. No hesitation. Just then, he heard a familiar voice calling out to him. He heard those same familiar footsteps, and the villain turned around, wary. Ian Kratz showed up, and just by looking at him, you could tell he was ready to tear this scumbag to shreds. Leon realized the kid had taken care of his guys, and in his head, he was chewing them out for not being able to handle some little punk. Ian repeated the question about what Leon did to Kanemia, this time with a lot more menace. The young mage kept getting closer and closer, just like before, filling him with dread. Realizing the kid was worried about her, Leon started stalling for time himself, hoping her butterflies would find her. But his answers just pissed Ahyan off even more, so he switched to a different interrogation method. Electric shocks instantly attacked the villain, feeling like 1,000 needles stabbing under his skin. The pain was hell, but thankfully didn't last long. Ahyan gave him a chance to confess what he did with Kanemia. But this guy just smirked evilly, like he was begging for another round of torture. The kid's patience was running out, but he knew killing him would mean a long search for the girl. And Leon just stared at his emotions, which Ahyan had never shown before. It made it clear that he was really worried about the Archduchess and was panicking. He'd always known Ian Kratz as arrogant, looking down on everyone, someone who always ignored him and acted like he was nothing. And if it wasn't for Ian, Leon would have become a ricochet, and then the next head of the tower. Spitting with rage, the villain hissed that his precious friend was gone. Everything inside the kid just flipped in an instant, like a lightning bolt hit him, and Leon pointed out the bloodstains and chains on the floor, proving she was dead. Grinning like a psycho, Leon kept saying how she screamed in agony. Then he straight up lied, saying she regretted ever meeting Kratz before she died. Like, if it wasn't for him, none of this would have ever happened to her. At that point, the kid's fury was completely out of control, and he blasted the villain with so much power the dude just vaporized in a heartbeat. Even after Leon was nothing but a pile of ash, Ian, heartbroken, still went to find Kanemia. He just wanted to find her body, at least, so he could say goodbye one last time. Suddenly, the sky above the city turned pitch black, and this creepy vibe just rolled in. The head of the magic tower felt that shift immediately. His little bird sidekick, Benjamin, felt it too. Regular folks probably didn't notice a thing. I mean, the weather was already gloomy. But the tower head knew Ayan was behind it and decided to track him down. He asked his assistant to cover his duties while he was gone. Benjamin saluted and wished him good luck finding Rakashi. Meanwhile, Kanemia kept wandering through the dimly lit hallways. The windows were huge, so she instantly saw how dark it had gotten outside. Plus, it got freezing cold, and all the butterflies just vanished at the same time. This girl had been wandering around for a solid half hour, but she still couldn't find her way out. She was even starting to think she'd be stuck here forever. But she didn't freak out, hoping Ayan would notice she was gone and come looking for her. Walking a little further, the girl heard muffled footsteps somewhere around the corner. She didn't know who they belonged to, so she decided to hide behind one of the pillars. At that moment, she felt a wave of fear, suspecting it was that evildoer. Soon a figure appeared, and she realized it was Ayan. But he looked a little off. His face seemed lifeless. Kanemia came out to him and started asking why he had been gone so long. But then she noticed something was wrong with him when she got closer. His face was a mask, totally blank, but tears were streaming down his cheeks. Kanemia was freaking out. She had no idea what was wrong and kept asking him what was going on. She was scared he was sick again, or maybe he'd gotten hurt again. Then, out of nowhere, something just snapped in Ahyan, and he grabbed her in a hug. He was squeezing her so tight, it just made Kanemia even more worried. But the kid was quietly celebrating that he hadn't believed Leon's lies about his friend being dead. Hearing what that scumbag had said, the girl got pissed and started cursing like a grown-up. But that didn't last long. Right now, all she wanted was for Ayan to stop crying. She admitted that at first, she'd wanted to yell at him for getting her mixed up in all this. But now she was the one apologizing, even though the kid blamed himself for everything. They were still locked in an embrace, and Kanemia could feel her friend trembling. Realizing how scared he was, she started racking her brain for a way to calm him down. Suddenly, they heard more footsteps, and then the head of the tower appeared. He saw how awful Ayan looked, and he could sense Leon's magic lingering everywhere. But he was relieved that Kanemia was alive and well, and that the villain Leon was gone. The girl told him they were okay, and asked to return to the mansion. She was worried about their caretaker. The tower head turned his attention to Ayan, who didn't dare to face him. He agreed to let them return, and striking the floor with his staff, opened a way out for the kids. Finally, he asked Ayan to come see him tomorrow, so they could talk. The boy, still avoiding eye contact, promised he would be there. The next day, the weather over the city was sunny, which was the opposite of how the boy felt. He arrived to see the boss like he promised, and the boss asked him to return to the tower. The boss is leaving in 2 days and plans to take Ayan with him. He tried to argue, but his mentor forbade him from staying with Kanemia any longer. Otherwise, she might find herself in mortal danger again. The boss noticed that his successor was too emotional when he was around her, and unlike other kids, he can't afford to be held hostage by his feelings. If the boss had been even a little later when they were in that dark place, his power would have gone haywire and could have really hurt the young Archduchess. Ian knows this all too well, and that's what makes him even sadder. And the mentor felt a pang of sadness seeing that look on his face. Still, we don't know the full extent of Kratz's power yet, and if something like that happens again, we're screwed. Suddenly, Ayan asked if he'd ever be able to go back to Kanemia. When he learns to control his power and his emotions, the mentor said yes, but until then, the boy needs to stay far away from her. He has to go away to learn self-control, even if it takes years or a lifetime. The city's festival was still going strong. People were having a blast. Ayan asked his mentor for permission to see his friend one last time, to say goodbye. When they met up, they went to the fair, and she bought some candy, especially for Vanessa, 'cause she's been through the ringer with all this. Kanemia suddenly noticed something interesting happening on the other side. She grabbed Ayan's hand, wanting him to come check it out with her. A little further down the street, a street performer was handing out ice cream to the kids. But Kanemia didn't stop there. They hit up a ton of different attractions. By the end of it, it felt like they'd seen the whole town, but she was having a blast. Noticing her buddy wasn't exactly thrilled, she asked him what was up. The kid was hanging out with her and everything, but he still seemed kinda down. Thinking he was worried about what had happened, Kinemia reassured him she was okay. She also told him not to sweat Vanessa, since she was alive and kicking. She'd already visited the nanny, told her not to cry, and to try and be strong like her. When things got tough, Kinemia always tried to ditch the bad memories and make new, good ones. Now she was asking Ian to do the same and build some awesome memories together. The young Archduchess was sure they had a ton of fun days ahead. Ian wanted to agree, but he needed to come clean about something important. Just as he was about to spit it out, fireworks went off, totally grabbing her attention. The girl always loved watching stuff like that, but the view from where they were sucked, so she started looking around for a better vantage point. Suddenly, Ian told her to hold on tight, wrapped his arms around her, and they used magic to float up into the air. Kinemia wasn't even scared of the height. She was too busy taking in the incredible view. To avoid just hanging in midair, Ian teleported them to the clock tower, best fireworks view in the house. He helped her down onto the balcony, while he braced himself again. He even wished the fireworks would last longer, just to put off the awkward conversation. All the while, he kept glancing at Kinemia, seeing how amazed she was by everything, and he felt a little lighter himself when he saw her sweet smile again. Plus, it was just the two of them out here, which she seemed to love even more. Suddenly, the Archduchess felt her heart start to race, and that's when Ian confessed he was planning to go back to the magic tower. That wasn't exactly great news, but she asked when he was leaving. He told her he'd be gone tomorrow, heading out with his mentor. He explained it was urgent business, then apologized for not mentioning it sooner. Kinemi felt a pang of sadness, even though she'd been the one planning to get rid of him in the first place. But she'd really grown attached to him during their time together. Deep down, she knew this was for the best for Ayan, since Rakasha couldn't leave the tower for long. But he suddenly felt bummed that she didn't even try to stop him. Still, he wasn't gonna hold it against her, and asked her to give him her hand. Kinemi obeyed, and he slipped a friendship bracelet onto her wrist. It's usually given during the harvest festival, and Ayan apologized for being so late with the gift, but this bracelet was one he made himself after a lesson in the sewing workshop. Kinemi really loved the gift and sincerely thanked her friend. She also noticed that her bracelet had the charm she'd given him hanging from it. The kid switched them on purpose so they'd remember each other, 'cause every time he looks at his bracelet, he'll think of Kinemia, and he wants her to think of him too whenever she looks at that pendant. Then, in a sadder voice, he asked if she'd forget him. That question struck the Archduchess as really weird, like her friend was saying goodbye forever. But taking his hand, the girl swore she could never forget him. In that moment, their eyes met, and Kinemia wished that moment could last forever, especially when the sadness on Ayan's face turned into a real smile. And so the young princess wouldn't worry. He promised her he'd be back soon. Kinemia tried not to show it, but she was really bummed to say goodbye to her sweet friend. She really will never be able to forget the days they spent together. Ayan Krotz felt the same way, believing they'd be reunited real soon. He didn't see it as a goodbye, just a see you later. 5 years passed since then, and to keep from losing it, Kinemia threw herself into her work. She and the alchemists were whipping up some seriously effective medicine. They'd expanded the place a few times already, 'cause the meds were good and patients kept coming. People were always gossiping about how much the young Archduchess cared, not believing those villainous rumors. Meanwhile, a mysterious dude with a thick beard and mustache showed up in town, and his slightly chubby frame was topped off with a hat that was something else. He was looking for the Heminwan complex, and he found the address he needed pretty quick. His mission was to stop Heminwan before he got too powerful, and also to find the alchemist Xintian and take him out. The guy wandered onto the complex's property, but Kinemia spotted him. She was holding a small shovel, 'cause she was working in the garden, and as soon as the guy noticed her, he was floored. Standing before him was a girl with knockout beauty, but dressed real simple. She told him he wasn't allowed here, and demanded to know who he was. The guy just stood there, silently gawking at her unbelievably gorgeous face. He couldn't figure out why someone so stunning was wasting her time working in a field. He finally introduced himself as Jimmy Golden and explained he was lost. But then he stumbled on this place and just had to admire the beautiful garden. The girl just repeated that no unauthorized personnel are allowed in here. He thought it was weird that she was talking to him, an aristocrat, so boldly. Just then, the alchemist Xin Tian walked up to see if there was any progress on the experiments. Hearing another person's voice, Jimmy spun around and was shocked all over again. Recognizing Tian immediately, he was surprised to see him in this place. Shin narrowed his eyes suspiciously and asked who this guy was. Jimmy started to introduce himself, but Kanemia suddenly declared that he was an intruder. And she also voiced her suspicions that the church had sent him. The man protested and kept insisting that he just got lost. Seeing a knockout like that, he just had to talk to her. That's when Jimmy felt something sting him behind the ear. Not knowing what hit him, he blacked out and hit the floor. The alchemist took him down with a neat trick so he wouldn't piss off his mistress. And she was a little worried Tien might have actually killed the guy. 2 servants hogtied the suspicious dude and dragged him out of there. This wasn't the first time the church had tried to take them down. Not after they got an award from the emperor himself for the Red Plague cure. It was an epidemic that swept the whole empire, turning people red and killing them in agony. The church can't handle the epidemic, so they're trying to sabotage Hemenwan. Kanemia couldn't figure out why they were scheming instead of focusing on a cure. Thing is, the church only heals the rich, while the disease runs wild among the common folk. And Hemenwan's trying to grow a medicinal herb that only grows underground. It just wouldn't take root here, which is why they're having such a hard time. Kanemia understood that the herb, like people, struggles to thrive far from its home. Their somber conversation was cut short by Vanessa rushing towards them. The Archduchess got worried, figuring something terrible had happened, but the nanny was just in a hurry to deliver an invitation. Kanemia usually sent invitations back, but this one was different, because it was an invitation to the debutante ball. The girl was so caught up in chores, she totally spaced that as an aristocrat, she had to be there. Vanessa was stoked, though. She was worried the lady wouldn't get an invite, but her happy dance got cut short by Kanemia's freaked-out yelp, 'cause she wasn't exactly thrilled about going to this ball. In the Empire, every year, some aristocrat gets to host the debutante ball, and you can only make your debut if you get an invite from that host. To get one of those, ladies and gents schmooze at social gatherings. And when they turn 17, the year the host comes of age, they shower him with gifts. So Kanemia was like, "Why me? I didn't even try." A few minutes later, Tien was back in his chill spot, and he waited for his lady to stop freaking out about the invitation and quit jabbing at the envelope with that trowel like she's trying to bury it. When the first wave of nerves passed, the girl started to whine, but not full-on bawl. That's when Tien told her to cut it out, saying she'd dig up the whole damn garden. He didn't get why she was so pissed about the invite and told her to take advantage of it. But Kanemia Lion in high society? It's just a name now, nothing left of her old glory. In the eyes of the aristocrats, she's just a recluse who couldn't hack it in high society. And she figured they just wanted to make fun of her and her dumb, nervous tics. Tien still thought she got invited because other people think she's interesting. But Kanemia wasn't buying it. The Duke of Roslin is running the show this year. The same guy who sponsors the church and pulled strings to get them out of lion territory. Now those families are beefing even harder because of that Red Ruin business. And this invite means they're trying to get the lion family under their thumb. Kanemia told Tiene how their feud started, and he was lost in thought. Still, he just told her to tough it out. And not just tough it out, but try not to dwell on the bad stuff and actually have some fun. He believes there are definitely people out there who'll want to get to know her and care about her. She was still worried that everyone at the ball would just hate her. Then Tien told her to look around, pointing out how many people thought she was a good person. First, he pointed to her nanny, who loves her so much she'd do anything for her. And the kind vassals and charity workers, too. Even the Behemoth sisters think of Kanemia like she's one of their own. Everyone who knows the real her loves her and would do anything to help. Listening to the alchemist, Kanemia knew he was right, but something still felt off. Then it hit her. He hadn't included himself among those who loved her. But if he didn't care, he wouldn't be here right now, holding her hand through all this. Suddenly, there was a thundering sound, like a mammoth shaking the ground. It was the one who adored Kanemia most of all. Her brave warrior, the guild leader, the Titan Lo, was rushing towards them. He was moving so fast, the wind made his eyes bulge out, making him look even more intimidating. But he wasn't mad at all. He was just in a hurry to hug his beloved fairy. So, he had to step away for 3 days. But he was so stoked to see her, like they hadn't seen each other in a decade. Then he noticed her worried face and asked her what was bugging her. When he found out she'd been invited to the ball, he started telling her everyone would totally dig her and fall in love with her. Kanemia was grateful to both of them for their warm words of support. Still, she's worried that she's never had friends her own age. And that's when Lo remembered that she has a special friend, Ion Kratz. He really is her friend, but he hasn't been around for a long time now. At that moment, Tien nudged Lo for bringing up something so sad, and the girl, touching the bracelet she never took off, assured them that she was okay, and her sadness from longing was a thing of the past. She decided to head to the study, saying she'd forgotten something there. And on the way, she kept thinking how much better it would be if she'd gotten a letter from Ian instead of that invitation. She'd much rather hear from someone whose smile she still remembers. Once in the study, Kanemia started writing him a letter, beginning with the most trivial stuff. She also really wanted to know if it was true that all mages traveled by flying. About the duchy, she wrote that nothing had changed, and that she missed him like crazy, as always. She'd love for him to visit, even for a little while, but she knew the rules there were super strict. She immediately gave the letter, written with so much love, to the butler to send. In return, he handed her a few letters, and she started looking them over. She hadn't gotten any letters from Ian, because he's a rikash and super busy, but she kept writing to him, sharing all sorts of news, and she promised to bake a ton of his favorite pies when he came to visit. Another 6 months went by, a harsh winter set in, and Kanemia kept writing to him, same as always. She knows from the Tower Master that he's doing okay, but she just wants him to drop her a line. And every time she sent a letter, she had no idea if Ayan was even getting them. She was so bummed out without him that she decided not to send the last letter. Instead, she walked over to the fireplace and just tossed it into the flames. The scrap of paper immediately started to smolder on the broken magic stones. But another event was coming up, and she needed to get ready for the ball. Out of all the fancy dresses, she picked the pink one, even though she didn't really care. But the nanny kept cheering her on, telling her to wear something brighter. After all, this was her long-awaited debut, and she had to be the belle of the ball. Kanemia, on the other hand, wanted to be as invisible as possible and not attract any attention. She even asked the nanny to find a dress the same color as the furniture so no one would notice her. On top of everything else, she had to practice her dancing. She wasn't great at it, but by the end, she was stepping on her partner's feet a little less. Vanessa thought it was weird that the Duke was organizing the ball. Usually, women handle that. But his wife is suffering from an illness, which is why Duke Roslin is sponsoring the church. Kanemia didn't know about that and wondered if there was another reason she was invited. Maybe the Duke is interested in the Manhwa complex. Every year, he donated to the church, hoping to heal his wife, but nothing worked. So, obviously, he started looking for other ways to deal with the illness, you know? Now, Kanemi understood why the church was so keen on keeping Manhwa in check. Besides, she'd never actually met Roslin and has no clue what he's really like, so she decided to take Tian's advice and just be upfront with everyone, even if they're gonna judge her right off the bat. Ball time! The palace where it's happening is decked out. You can see it from miles away. Inside, there's some smooth music playing. Makes even the laziest guys want to move. Some of the ladies are huddled up in groups, doing a little gossiping, and others are buzzing about who's hooking up with who tonight. A bunch more people showed up, wondering if Archduchess Lion would actually make an appearance. Plenty knew her as the one who built a killer business from the ground up, starting as a kid. And tons of kids wanted to meet her because of those slime toys. Those toys were so hot, even grown-ups were playing with them. Honestly, even the adults were curious about this lady who never showed her face in society. I mean, the rumor was Lady Kanemia was so hideous she was always in hiding. And some say that girl's straight up wicked, like a demon from hell. But those were just rumors, because none of them had ever actually seen Lady Lion. But today, the aristocrats could finally see for themselves how true those rumors really were. And while everyone was busy gossiping, Archduchess Lion finally arrived. Everyone there immediately turned to look. The girl walked slowly, holding on to her small purse, and a lot of jaws dropped when they saw her face. Kanemia didn't pay attention at first and kept walking, holding her silk dress. Then, she glanced at the curious nobles. She still felt awkward, since this was her first time at an event like this. Then Kanemia heard people start to admire her beauty. Even Duke Roslin noticed the commotion and turned his attention to her. And the Marquise's son next to him scoffed, saying she wouldn't even find a dance partner. Since she'd been stuck in the estate for so long, things could get real embarrassing. This dude's the eldest son of Marcus Hurling, which explains why he had the nerve to badmouth the Archduchess, even though he totally bombed at every social event he got invited to. And now he was trying to push his agenda on Duke Roslin, but it didn't fly. So, he excused himself to go mingle and stretch his legs. The Duke stayed with his wife and remarked that Lady Kanemia takes after her father. Duchess Roslin liked her too, especially since she understood why they invited her, and now it's obvious why Kanemia became a famous businesswoman so young. But the Duke wasn't jumping to conclusions until he clarified a few things. He just hasn't forgotten the trouble with his daughter, but Kanemia isn't to blame for that. Roslin wasn't letting personal feelings cloud his judgment when choosing a partner. He's just super curious to see what the Archduchess is gonna do. All he knows about her so far is that she knows how to play the game. Meanwhile, people were whispering about how hot she was, and some even thought she was a fake, but others who knew her better swore it was really her. Especially since Kanemia looks exactly like her dad, Troy Lyon. You can also see the nobility and independence in her, even though her family's glory days are behind them. Kanemia just oozes the confidence of a true heir to the great Lyon family and its legendary history. Now, a lot of people were thinking she's not just some average Joe, and the Archduchess herself was trying her best not to show how freaked out she actually was. Once she was in the hall, she started looking for a place where she wouldn't be noticed as much. Her eyes landed on a distinguished-looking man, and she figured it had to be Duke Roslin. Next to him was his wife, whose face looked pale even under all that makeup. But the girl was stoked to be there, because this was her shot at making it big. Girding herself, Kanemia walked right up to the Duke and Duchess. The Duchess was the first to greet her, smiling at how lovely she looked, and Kanemia greeted the hosts of the ball with perfect politeness. She also thanked them for inviting her to such an important event. All eyes were on her now, especially since she was the first to come and say hello. If she'd messed up even a little, it would have been a total disaster for her. But Kanemia pulled it off with the confidence that only youth can bring. Then, she turned to the Duke about the potions she'd sent him before. She wanted to know if they'd actually worked. Turns out, nobody knew Roslin was getting potions from the Archduchess. I mean, he oversees the church, so people were expecting him to blow a gasket. On the other hand, his wife, who's been locked up sick for ages, showed up at the banquet today and doesn't look like she's kicking the bucket anytime soon. That's when the Duke finally realized what this girl was up to. He'd used the potion on his wife, and since she's here, it must have worked. Now it looks like Kanemia did this to boost Heminwon's reputation. He was pissed that she'd publicly asked him about the medicine like that. She said it with such audacity, and Kanemia worried it was a total bust. But then, the Duke admitted the potion's effect was pretty damn impressive. The girl felt a huge weight lift, 'cause Roslin approved of Heminwon's medicine. They moved to a separate table to continue their conversation. There, Kanemia explained she knew his situation, but she wanted to help the Duchess. Then, she expressed her gratitude for his understanding. And then, all innocent-like, she asked the Duke for his opinion, since she's still green. She even confessed she wants to open another branch outside the Archduchy. All this time, Roslin was studying her face, and now he saw features of Lord Kenneth himself. He pointed that out to her, and Kanemia felt like it was a threat, since her grandpa was poisoned. But the point is, Lord Kenneth knew what people wanted, and had the guts and the power to make it happen. And Roslin pointed out that Kanemia inherited her grandpa's sharp eye. Thing is, Kenneth's success made him a whole lot of enemies. The girl got all fidgety again, and the Duchess told her to just ignore her husband's comments. And she thanked her for the potion, said it made her feel a whole lot better. So the Duchess is totally cool with a Heminwon branch opening up in their duchy. The Duke Roslin backed her up with a nod, showing he agreed. So they decided to open another branch, and Kanemia's mission for the day was a success. The Duchess got curious why the lady wasn't enjoying the evening, since it's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of day. Besides, she noticed plenty of guys lining up to dance with Lady Lion. Kanemia just noticed some dude was totally checking her out. Tall, ripped blonde guy with long, wavy hair, and a killer smile. Besides being hot, he's got a fortune and a fancy title. He's basically the definition of Mr. Perfect. What's more, there was a whole crowd of women drooling over him, wanting to dance, but Kanemia didn't want to repeat her dad's mistakes, so she pretended to go for a walk in the garden to ditch this scene. The Duchess warned her not to go there, saying it was a mess right now. She also told her to stay away from the construction zone because it's not safe. But for the Archduchess, this ballroom was way more dangerous, so she bailed. It just started raining outside, and Kanemia found a spot for herself in the gazebo. It was a little weird how the weather just took a nosedive like that. Still, she was glad she finally found a spot where nobody was around. Out here, she could really see how the garden was a total mess. On the one hand, staying inside would have been smarter, but Kanemia was sick of all the staring. From the gazebo, she spotted a couple stepping out onto the balcony to chat. Those two looked like they were having the time of their lives, and the girl sadly figured she was never going to find love like that. Her dress was soaked through by now, but she was still going to head back. And just as she stepped onto the gazebo steps, she felt something yank her hem. Turns out, The bottom of her dress was snagged in a crack in the stone pillar. The girl tried to pull him out, but all her attempts were useless. My mood was already crap, and now a freaking thunderstorm starts. It was so intense that the glass dome of the gazebo started cracking. Any second now, the ceiling's gonna collapse on her, so Kanemia started yelling for help. But nobody was around, and no one could hear her. The situation seemed totally hopeless, and she really wished Ayan was there with her right now. The cracking glass was getting louder and louder. Bracing for the worst, Kanemia covered her face. Out of the corner of her eye, she just caught a glimpse of a raven flying out of her pendant. But a few seconds went by, and nothing had hit her yet. Lifting her head, the Archduchess saw that all the shards were frozen in midair. It was like straight-up magic, but only one dude could pull off something like that. The girl started squinting through the shards and falling drops. A little further off, where the light barely hit, she spotted a figure in a long coat. From that distance, you could barely make out the guy's face. But Kanemia knew in her gut, with every fiber of her being, that it was Ayan Krotz. The guy took a step off the fence he'd been standing on, and then, using magic, he floated through the air toward his friend. Like he couldn't wait another second, he reached out his hand to her halfway there. Kanemia, on the other hand, was stuck in place because her dress was caught. And the next thing she knew, her long-awaited, beloved friend was standing right next to her. The first thing he asked was if she remembered him. The girl was actually surprised he thought she could forget him. Ayan reached out to her again, wanting to touch the person he loved, and the glove on his hand suddenly started melting like a piece of plastic. He incinerated it himself so he could touch Kanemia's face with his bare hand, not a glove. Then he said softly, with admiration, how beautiful she'd become. He couldn't hold back anymore, and hugged the one he'd longed for all these years tightly. He held her so close, the Archduchess could hear his heartbeat. They stood like that for a while, and Ayan confessed that he'd missed her terribly. But Kanemia was confused. If he missed her so much, why hadn't he written even once? Questions popped up left and right. What he'd been up to, how he showed up at just the right time, like he was watching her. And the big one, if he could get here so easily, why hadn't he ever answered her letters? But even now, no answers. Just helping to get her dress unstuck. Kanemia's feelings were all twisted up. She was happy and bummed out at the same time. Then she headed into the banquet hall, and the nobles got a whole new shock. People recognized Rakasha, but they were clueless about why he was there. Even weirder was seeing him next to Archduchess Lion. They weren't exactly walking together. Ayan was trailing her by a couple of steps, and he looked so bummed, like a puppy who knows he's in the doghouse, waiting to be forgiven. Kanemia, on the other hand, was trying her best not to show how ticked off she really was. People started whispering, saying there was something going on between them. But Kanemia decided to ignore all the gossip and just dreamed of getting the hell out of there. First, though, she went to say goodbye to the Duchess, throwing in a few flattering words. And the Duchess asked why the lady wasn't looking at anyone, like she already had someone in mind. Just then the music started, and the Duchess suggested she dance with the handsome Rakasha, though you couldn't tell by looking at him that he was exactly thrilled to dance. So the Duchess gave him a mental nudge, telling him not to just stand there like a statue. That energy blast snapped Ayan awake, and he realized what she wanted. He took a few steps forward and offered his hand to the Archduchess, announcing that it would be an honor to have this dance with her. The girl was thrown off. Dancing with him wasn't exactly on her agenda right now, but she caught the eyes of literally everyone in the room on her. Turning him down at this point would have been a total dick move, so she agreed. Other couples lined up too, ready to cut a rug to the music. Kanemia felt awkward as hell and couldn't bring herself to look Ayan in the eye. Their dance started, but her head was a million miles away. She wanted to grill him about everything, but she just couldn't work up the nerve. Suddenly, Ayan spoke up first, asking how she'd been holding up all this time. And that's when Kanemia snapped, telling him he never answered a single one of her letters, and didn't even try to get in touch with her for all these years. She was seriously worried about him, totally lost, and didn't know what to think. A wave of guilt washed over Ayan, like a lump in his throat. He started apologizing for everything, admitting it was all his fault. He reached out to touch her face, but she suddenly pulled away, and she bolted from the room, the pain inside just too much to handle. Ian chased after her, trying to explain, saying he had a really good reason, but she couldn't imagine what kind of reason could justify it. What excuse could he possibly have for not even sending a single letter in 5 years? He kept trying to explain, saying he couldn't write, but that he missed her like crazy. And he begged her to believe him, because it was the honest truth. Kinemia could believe he was worried. She'd seen a few signs herself. Like that raven that flew out of the pendant. She's sure that was Ian. He confirmed it was a familiar he'd put in there, so it could warn him if Kinemia was ever in danger. That made sense to her, but she was still ticked. He hadn't explained why he hadn't written, though she figured his stuff was probably way more important than her. He had his own private office in the Magic Tower, where he was training. Every now and then, he'd watch the Archduchess through the magic window. He couldn't come to her, but at least he could see how she was doing. Sometimes the head of the Magic Tower would catch him at it and realize the kid was pining. So, one time, he came up to him and told him to quit peeping. Said if he kept spying, things would only get worse for him. Meanwhile, he was hoping Ayan wouldn't break his promise and head to Kanea. The kid told his teacher not to sweat it, promising he'd keep his word. But he wasn't gonna just sit on his butt if the girl was in trouble. And if the time came when she needed his help, he'd go protect her, no question. A little while later, a Hemenwan branch opened up in Duke Roslin's territory. They started planning a celebration for it, loading up the tables with drinks and snacks. For some guys it's one thing, but for the alchemist Tien, the only thing that mattered was that the booze was top shelf. But he was the first to propose a toast to the expansion of their compound. Kinemia and Lo were giving him the side-eye, 'cause he grabbed a bowl the size of a freaking bucket. He promised them he'd just have a shot, and Tien even specified it was a grown-up shot. Lo stared at his mentor, realizing the guy had absolutely no shame. But Kinemia noticed something more important. There was writing in red paint behind them. It said something like, "May that no-good, heretical, witchcraft-loving Hemenwan sect get out of here." But Tien wasn't surprised. He'd seen stuff like this plenty of times since arriving in the West. The servants were telling the lady not to stress so much. They knew a way to wipe it all away quickly. But washing off the paint and reinforcing the barriers was just adding to the expenses. And to Kinemia, it felt like swatting away a bunch of annoying flies. Suddenly, Ayan showed up and said you could just squash those flies. The girl wanted to, but it's pretty much impossible. The church messes things up, so she can't file a formal complaint. Even if she did complain, her family's enemies would side with the church and accuse her of slander. But the guy pointed out that she doesn't have to go through official channels. But Kinemia didn't believe you could just suddenly clean up the church and get rid of the scumbags behind it. Ayan wasn't suggesting that, but he could make it so nobody noticed anything. The girl hesitated, and he told her to let him know if she changed her mind. She got more curious about how long he was staying, since Rakasha can't leave the tower for long. He was visiting her now, but Kinemia put him up in Hemenwan. The guy hugged his friend, saying he wanted to stay longer, since they hadn't seen each other in ages. The girl told him to back off, especially since she needed to get to the field. She said she was growing medicinal herbs, and Ian was suddenly interested in seeing that. He knows it's a finicky plant that only grows outside the dungeon, with water from the Ham's hot springs. He went through hell getting that water, and even grew the herb himself for research back in the day. Then, he proudly added that he did everything exactly like Kinemia. Her friend's story set off alarm bells for the Archduchess, and she asked him to repeat himself. Specifically, what's needed to grow the medicinal herb. That plant is super important to her. It's a key ingredient in the cure for the Red Plague. And to get mass production going, they decided to grow the herb in Hemenwan. They tried every possible method to do it, from the temperature to the water. They even made the place look like a dungeon, planting magic stones and everything. Kinemia was kinda blown away that all it took was water from the Hamza spring. She's wondering how Eon figured that out, 'cause that info ain't in the books. He's been researching medicinal herbs. That's how he stumbled on it. And now he's asking what method they've been using lately. Not long ago, Lo suggested that the location was the problem. Hemenwan stinks of different herb concoctions, stuff that just doesn't vibe with this plant. The Kshans have always believed that everything has a soul, even plants. Then he leaned down to the sprouts and started begging them to grow, which Kinemia thought was pretty weird. But Lo kept praying to the plant, so she decided to let him do his thing. So he was just ranting at this patch of dirt for like a solid hour. And, wouldn't you know it, to the Archduchess's surprise, a little sprout popped up. After that, Law got even more intense, begging the grass to focus on itself and just grow, damn it. Seeing what they were up to, Tien figured she'd had a bit too much early in the morning, and then all the sprouts just withered. Kanea couldn't tell Ayan about this, or he'd think she was completely out of her mind. So all she did was ask how to find the Ham's hot spring water. It's been showing up in the mountain range lately, but it's hard to predict when it'll appear. Not many people know about this. mostly just folks who really know the area. And for sharing such important intel, Ayan asked his friend for a little something in return. He wasn't asking for anything crazy, just to crash at her castle for a bit. He wanted to get closer to her, but she shot him down, saying the castle wasn't a hotel. The guy was confused, since he used to live there when she was taking care of him. But back then he was sick, and they were kids. Things are different now. Now they're both adults, and if they live together, people will start talking. Deep down, Kanemia wished people weren't so quick to judge based on appearances. Evening was coming, and Ayan offered to walk the Archduchess back to the castle. They walked along the path in silence for a while, just holding hands. The girl kept thinking about Ayan's request, and knew he didn't mean anything by it. She also caught herself feeling something weird when they held hands. Glancing at her friend now and then, she felt a knot forming in her stomach. It's like something inside is clawing its way out, desperate to spill its guts. Ajan wasn't rushing to break the silence either. He was lost in his own head. Meanwhile, back at the church, the priests were holding an emergency powwow. One of them had met with the emperor about the Archduchess's request for mediation. The priest, for his part, assured His Majesty that the church was completely in the dark, and the emperor only promised to smooth things over, not to punish them for slandering the church. Now, sending people to the Archduchy seemed like a dumb move in hindsight, and they suspected the emperor was ready to take the Archduchy under his wing, even though he still hasn't officially recognized the Archduchess's title, and he's turned down every request for an audience from her vassals. Still, His Majesty, just like Roslin, could turn his back on the church at any moment. See, rumors are flying around among the priests, and they could reach his ears. I'm talking about the corruption the high priest is involved in. Speaking of which, he just showed up in the hall, sensing our unease. His face was hidden by a dark veil, with a golden pendant hanging from his forehead over it. He told us not to worry, because our new benefactor has agreed to take Rosalind's place. The high priest didn't say exactly who it was. This person wishes to remain anonymous. But he assured us that we don't have to worry about Hemenwon anymore. He's found a way, because if all the alchemists die, the Archduchess won't be able to control Hemenwon. Meanwhile, back at the medical complex, the alchemists were discussing that scandalous play, multitasking like crazy, cleaning and getting everything ready. Some folks were getting worried, because the boss lady hadn't been seen in days. Someone spilled the beans that she went off to find a way to grow some magic herb. Suddenly, we heard stomping, and uninvited guests crashed through the gates. Alchemists, too. It was the church, and their leader split the rest into 2 squads. He sent one squad to handle the west side, and the other to the east. Then, raising his sword, he declared they were there to protect this land in the name of the Lord. The others echoed him, ready to start the cleansing as true servants of God. One alchemist was immediately sent to tell Tien we were under attack, and the rest of us grabbed whatever we could to fight back. Meanwhile, somewhere else, in a little tavern, a certain lady was getting served all sorts of snacks at her table, and a ton of them. The staff couldn't believe one person could put all that away. And while she was busy chowing down, she got a visitor. Archduchess Kanemia showed up in a disguise cloak and sat down at the same table. This woman, Jacqueline, wasn't thrilled someone just plopped down without asking. But the guest had a good reason. She was there to make a deal. Just to be clear, she warned, if Jacqueline refused, she'd seriously regret it. That tone didn't sit well with the woman, even though she knew she was dealing with a noble. Turns out, not all commoners are gonna roll over for fancy folks. Kanemia then placed something on the table, and Jacqueline's face changed drastically. It's the bracelet of Saint Enrique, which can help lift her curse. The Archduchess now hoped her guest was willing to talk. All she did was ask how she found out about her curse, and got the bracelet. But Kanemia couldn't just give away such valuable information. And as the head of the Information Guild, Jacqueline should know that. The woman paused for a moment, but finally asked what this dame wanted. Kanemia needs 3 things, the first being the location of the Ham's hot springs. She also needs intel on some, let's just say, questionable activities within the church. And lastly, she wants the right to trade information with this guild. Knowing Jacqueline was suffering from the curse, Kanemia hoped she'd jump at the offer. After all, when a person's body and soul are vulnerable, they'll agree to almost anything, even a raw deal. But Jacqueline said one bracelet wasn't enough to seal the agreement. The Archduchess was hoping her bribes would do the trick, since the guild leader's always eating because of the curse. Turns out, that gluttony curse also brought on a serious case of the greeds. But Jacqueline wasn't after cash. She just wanted answers to 2 questions. Kanemia agreed, even though she was worried they'd be about her family's secrets. And the guild leader, like she was really thinking hard, got ready to ask her first question, which turned out to be pretty simple. She wanted to know the Archduchess's favorite dessert. She wanted to know if she was more of a fruit or vanilla kind of gal. Knowing someone's favorite food is valuable intel. It can win you favor or be used against them. The second question was way tougher. Jacqueline wants to know the whereabouts of the guy who put a hex on her. She wanted to talk to him, even though she wasn't sure how much good it would do. A few years back, her parents had a little disagreement about what new stuff to stock in their shop. Dad thought they should get some imported fabric with a unique, exotic vibe. But Mom was pushing for colorful lollipops that would really catch people's eyes. They asked their daughter for advice, but she was just a kid and told them to figure it out themselves. But after some convincing, she suggested that instead of adding more products, it would be more helpful to improve how they displayed the stuff they already had. Jacqueline was a prodigy. At 5 years old, she could instantly add up the total cost of everything on the shelves. By the time she was 10, she'd turned her parents' failing shop into the biggest store in the whole village, and she opened her own place right after she turned 14. The store started as a small country shop, but it just kept growing, until it took over a whole building downtown, right in the rich part of the city. With the money she made, Jacqueline bought a mansion, fancy furniture, clothes, and jewelry. She even hired servants, because she figured you could buy anything with enough cash. That's what she thought anyway, until an order came down from the capital, saying that starting next month, there'd be an extra tax on all imported dishware. But certain merchants, certified by the Imperial Palace, would be exempt. That day, Jacqueline was absolutely livid and scared the hell out of the staff. In a fit of rage, she trashed her whole damn office. But it didn't make her feel better, just pissed off that now it was a mess. So she ordered the servants to clean it up, ASAP. She had every right to be angry. There was no good reason for those tax hikes. For a while, she tried to figure out what she'd missed, and asked them to check if Count Louise had an appointment last week. Her assistant confirmed it, and Jacqueline understood what was up. Recently, their little brat ordered all kinds of imported dishes from her, obviously planning to rip them off. And it really burned her that yet again, the aristocrats were shamelessly stealing what she created with her own blood, sweat, and tears. Plus, they changed the rules on a whim, like they own the whole damn world. From now on, commoners like Jacqueline better just suck it up and deal. But she wasn't about to let a bunch of nobodies walk all over her. She decided to find someone who could teach these aristocrats a lesson, and it wasn't going to be anyone she worked with. Her own staff would just bail at the first sign of trouble anyway. Time went on, and Jacqueline still couldn't find the right person. But one day, she ended up in a small village out east. She saw this kind of boring-looking shop and decided to check it out. That's where she met Merlin, who gave her a real friendly welcome. She was wearing a maid's uniform from the neighboring earl's estate, and Jacqueline couldn't figure out why a shopkeeper was wearing a maid's outfit. But then I noticed this woman was a freaking human calculator. The girl picked out a bunch of different stuff, figuring out the price herself beforehand. And when she put it all on the counter, Merlin nailed the total in like a second. Jacqueline kept the experiment going, adding a couple more items, then more and more, and each time she was blown away by this clerk's talent. Noticing the customer was messing around, Merlin asked her to get real. Plus, she had a line, and told her to make up her mind about what she wanted to buy first. That's when Jacqueline just straight up asked why a maid was working in a shop. She also wanted to know who taught her to calculate like that, but she dodged the questions, and just kept doing her job, helping the customers. That's when Jacqueline lost it, shoving aside some old dude and leaning over the counter, demanding answers. Merlin gave the rude customer a real stink eye at first. Then, quick as lightning, she shoved a lollipop in her mouth like she was dealing with a spoiled brat. And to keep her from messing with business, she grabbed her by the scruff and dragged her into the back. Back there, Merlin plopped her down on an old chair and told her to stay put. Then she slammed the door shut, not even listening to Jacqueline's pleas. Jacqueline didn't fight it anymore, and while she waited, she tried to figure out what kind of woman this even was. She did notice, though, that this cheap lollipop actually tasted pretty good. After a while, Merlin opened the door again and asked how she liked the treat. She was happy to hear Jacqueline liked it, since she makes them herself. These candies are her little reward for the young master when he's a good boy. If he does something good, Merlin gives him a lollipop and tells him he's great. Then she complimented Jacqueline for waiting patiently and not throwing a fit, while she stroked her head, but the girl immediately pulled away. And the shopkeeper smiled and apologized for accidentally upsetting her. In that moment, Jacqueline knew this was the one. smart and tough enough to work with. Hoping Merlin would become her partner, she proposed a little venture. This woman readily accepted Jacqueline's offer. She packed up all her things, only slightly regretting that she wouldn't see the little master again. Upon arriving in the capital, Jacqueline began to train her in her trade. Up until now, Merlin was just doing odd jobs, waitressing or helping out in shops. But she was so sharp, she picked things up instantly and got the hang of things fast. After a quick crash course, Jacqueline moved on to something bigger. She decided to create a person from scratch, Lord Owen, the head of an ancient family. To make this work, she needed to adjust some paperwork. Merlin set up a network, and the paperwork got taken care of. Jacqueline bought land in a secluded spot and built Lord Owen's mansion there. And by incentivizing a down-on-his-luck nobleman, she got the Earl into high society. This Earl protected her trading company, and the aristocrats stopped squeezing her business dry. Owen also got access to intel among the upper crust, and Jacqueline was able to build an information guild. By then, she couldn't deny Merlin's skills. For the first time ever, she'd met someone who thought as fast and along the same lines as she did. Jacqueline had this feeling she'd finally found a kindred spirit. Of course, they weren't identical. Jacqueline had a bit of a temper, and when she got angry, she'd usually take it out on her stuff. Merlin tried to calm her down, but that just made her even angrier. Jacqueline figured it was her call what she did with her own belongings. But Merlin was worried. She noticed her partner had cut herself, so she grabbed a bandage and carefully wrapped her hand to prevent infection. After that kind of care, Jacqueline actually felt bad for yelling at her. And she even got a lollipop on top of it all. She always thought people hated her for being smart. But Merlin wasn't just smart, she was full of love too. Jacqueline even wondered if her partner was even capable of getting angry. But she knew that was a pretty dumb thing to think. One day, Merlin got a letter from back home. The letter was about her father, and the news really bummed her out. Her father had gotten really sick, and she needed to go back to her hometown. She didn't know how long she'd be gone. It could be weeks or months. First, she wanted to see how her father was doing. Then she'd send Jacqueline a letter with the details. Her job would have to be handed off to someone else, and she'd already taken care of everything. And here's the kicker. Her dad needs this super expensive medicine. So, Merlin asked her boss if she could borrow the cash. That's when Jacqueline started thinking Merlin might just skip town. And she straight up said she wasn't lending her a dime because she figured Merlin would take the money and run, use it to start her own thing. Merlin tried to reassure her, saying she had no reason to screw her over. But everyone who'd ever left Jacqueline said the same thing, and it just pissed her off. Seeing how badly life had kicked this woman in the teeth, Merlin didn't push it. The next day, she just vanished, didn't even say goodbye. She only left a note for her former boss on the bed. She confessed in it that she'd taken just enough money for the medicine, apologized for taking it without asking, but promised to pay it back as soon as she saved up. She also pointed out that there are things in this world you can buy with money, but there are things you can't. And she asked Jacqueline to think about what was more important to her. A few months later, Merlin's debt was repaid, and Jacqueline hired a new employee. There wasn't much new work, since Merlin had prepared everything so thoroughly. But the business owner felt empty without her partner. From then on, she was plagued by a terrible hunger, and it became her curse. Kinemia, after hearing the story, was surprised that the head of the Information Guild couldn't find one woman. But it just so happens that Jacqueline doesn't exactly have a way with people. The Archduchess felt sorry for this girl, who was regretting what she'd done, and promised she'd definitely find where Merlin was hiding out. Jacqueline couldn't believe it, since even she, with all her resources, hadn't been able to. And she runs the biggest intel network in the whole damn empire. Kinemia didn't know how to find Merlin yet, but she had something to rely on. That answer seemed more than a little fishy to the guild leader. Still, there weren't any other options, so the Archduchess suggested they head back to her castle. On the way, Jacqueline kept wondering what this lady was counting on. Almost there, Kinemia suggested she get some rest for the night, and they could talk more tomorrow. And as the Archduchess walked into the mansion, worried servants rushed towards her. They said she needed to get to Manhwa ASAP because it was under attack. Kinemia was shocked. She didn't think the church would go this far. Getting there right away, she saw total chaos. Almost everything was wrecked. Guards were there, standing over some tied-up thugs. One of the guys reported that the church sent the Wolves of God. They're the church's elite squad. That's why they called for Master Ian. Kinemia noticed her friend, who came up to her covered in blood, and she felt a jolt of fear inside, worried he was hurt again. Seeing she was freaked out by how he looked, The guy told her not to worry, it wasn't his blood. Then, he explained he tried to settle things peacefully, but the enemies were thirsty for a fight. Ayan was about to apologize for everything, but Kanemia rushed to him, relieved he was okay. She also thanked him, saying she couldn't bear it if she lost the residents of Hemawan. So she was super grateful that he protected the place. Right when the attack happened, one of the guys came to Ayan. After reporting the attack, he started begging Lord Rakashi for help. He said the Black Knight guys were here with their leader, and the guards couldn't handle them. But the dude was still refusing, saying the Archduchess would be bummed. From day one, she'd made him promise not to get into any fights, no matter what, because she doesn't like it when Ayan hurts people. But the clincher was that she'd be way more upset if the Hemenwan residents got hurt. The Archduchess treats all those people like their family. That helped Ayan change his mind, because it's important to him that Kanemia's happy. The alchemist swore she wouldn't just be happy, she'd be grateful. The guy started getting ready, even though it only took him a few seconds. But he warned that if the lady distanced herself from him, this messenger would, face some unpleasant consequences. And now, Ian was sure he hadn't let the Archduchess down at all. She assured him he'd done a great job, and thanked him again. The kid felt a huge weight lift off his shoulders. He'd been on edge until then. The next day, Kanemia met with Jacqueline, apologizing for not seeing her off yesterday. And now the guest, as payment for the bracelet, is ready to spill the beans on some shady dealings within the church. There's this elders faction and a secret society, and these groups are at each other's throats. The elders faction is all about tradition, no exceptions, but this more progressive secret society started pushing back. Kanemia figured out that the attack on Hemenwan was the elders faction's doing. Now she wanted to find their weaknesses, and learned that the high priest was dealing church treasures. Some of the statues and holy texts in the church are clever knockoffs. Jacqueline found traces of the priest's contact with some rich guys, but that's all she could dig up. To find out more, Kanemia needs to find Merlin. The Archduchess agreed, also noticing that her guest hadn't touched her food, but she took it as a good sign and suggested they go see someone she trusts. They headed to Ayan's place, Kanemia hoping he could help her out with some magic. Jacqueline, seeing the Archduchess was leaning on Rakasha, was surprised, but kept her mouth shut. The guy explained there ain't no magic that can find someone in the blink of an eye, but he told her not to lose hope just yet, 'cause there is one way. He needs something that belongs to the person they're looking for, and it can be anything. Just gotta be something they used a lot, so he can turn it into a search device. He ain't making any promises, though, that this magic's gonna work right. The search device goes off when that person's magic is nearby. So, they'll have to walk around with the device everywhere to find a lead. But they could end up searching the whole damn empire and still miss him along the way. But then Jacqueline had this genius idea: send people to every corner of the globe. Kanemia wanted to use the Black Knight, but Tien pointed out that just feeding them would cost a fortune. But Hemenvor's profits are going up every day, so she wasn't worried. She was more concerned about advertising costs. She really blew through the budget last time, when she was putting up notices all over the empire looking for alchemists. And Tien suggested using those guys specifically, the alchemists. There are tons of them, always traveling back and forth for ingredients. They could handle the announcements too. Besides, Hemenwan and all its employees are Kanemia's property, and she has the right to use them as she sees fit. So, along with the warriors, there were now more people, but it still didn't seem like enough. She found out from Ayan that he could make a few hundred of those devices. Jacqueline overheard that and was all, "Yo, what's with the massive order?" But the Archduchess had this idea to send people all over the empire. Later, Kanemia asked about Tien's wound, since he got hit during the attack. He said not to worry, but Lu jumped in, admitting he took a beating too. Kanemia was like, "Why are you even complaining? You didn't lift a finger to help." Even though he was supposed to be guarding her, he could have held back some backup. But then Tien chimed in that the alchemist just needed some medicine to get back to 100%. Lu and Kanemia gave him a look, but he doubled down. Then the Archduchess announced she wanted to give Hemenwan and the guild a vacation. But first, they all had to complete one simple little task. The boss lady wants everyone to visit their hometowns. People got hyped, talking about vacation plans and seeing their families. Soon, Lana and Sayer rolled up to the meeting, on the Archduchess's orders. They brought a magic gizmo that everyone gets to borrow for the break, and Kanemia explained the instructions, what it's for, and how to use it. Plus, since this is going to be work during vacation, she promised to pay up. Jacqueline still wasn't sure if the Archduchess had lost her marbles, trusting them with this gig. She was going to keep her mouth shut since it wouldn't hurt her personally. But Kanemia hinted that this vacation would actually cost her. She suggested just proving the attack happened, and the priest would get what's coming to him. He'll be excommunicated and banned from ever setting foot in the capital again. Still, Jacqueline didn't get why this was the way to go. But a trial will take time. The priest will bolt, and his cronies will scrub the place clean of evidence. Even if he gets locked up, the rich guys will bail him out, and he'll just do it again. Kanemia wasn't having that. She'd already lost too many people close to her. So, she decided to nip it in the bud and wipe out anything that could cause trouble. And she's taking the hit not for Jacqueline, but to protect her own people. That's when her guest also noticed that the Archduchess was more like her grandfather than anyone knew. Next, Jacqueline mentioned she'd been to Merlin's hometown, but she wasn't there. Plus, it's tough to make that kind of money in the short time it took her to pay it back. She probably stayed in the city and got a job. The girl's got serious talent. But starting her own business? No way she had the cash or the time, unless she partnered up with someone. Kanemia suggested asking around with the merchants, but Jacqueline was already on that. In that case, the Archduchess decided to reach out to someone else. The investigation into the merchant Merlin worked with was being handled by Duke Roslin, and things were moving pretty smoothly. His vast intel network has a way of nipping rumors in the bud, and the Archduchess's people were scattered all over the empire looking for Merlin. It's been a few days since they started, but still no word. Kanemia was getting seriously stressed. It's like that woman vanished off the face of the earth. Turns out they saw a woman matching her description with some merchants, but she's vanished without a trace. The girl suddenly asked what the Behemo sisters were up to, and they reminded her they were making a gift for her boyfriend, or so they thought, at her request. Kanemia objected to the boyfriend part, but Lana didn't buy it, since the gift was made of expensive stuff. The Archduchess just wanted to give him something grown up, not some childish trinket. After all, Aeon doesn't even wear the bracelet she gave him, and she wore his until her debut. The sisters told her not to fight it. They can see that Rikasha cares about her. Even Jacqueline's heard the rumors, and Kanemia told her to cut it out with the teasing. Then she got back to the search for Merlin, which still had 0 leads. Jacqueline was starting to think they'd never find her. She's still super grateful for the help and for setting up the search. That's when Kanemia figured Mernil might have gone off to the mountains to live like a hermit. I mean, that's the only way to disappear completely and hide from everyone, right? That same fate would have awaited her sisters if Kanemia hadn't stepped in back then. So, she asked them, if they'd had a falling out, where would one of them go? The girls were thinking it over, but then the Archduchess decided to set up a little test. First, she pointed out that Jacqueline and Merlin lived and worked together every single day. So they must have talked about a ton of stuff, even the little things, and during their time off, they'd go to hot springs or just chill at the villa. Merlin looked after her and got her out into nature. She even helped out with the little chores and always knew how to give a compliment. Hearing that story, the sisters admitted they'd been sticking close by. That's why Merlin couldn't have just vanished into thin air. Because of her, Jacqueline's been looking so much better. She's always working otherwise. Even so, the guild leader couldn't imagine Merlin being in this castle. She's smart, sure, but not a killer, so there's no way she could sneak in here. Although, there's always the chance she found a way in secretly. Jacqueline tested the device here too, but way back when she was studying it, it didn't react back then, so she hasn't used it since. That's when Kanemia exchanged a look with the sisters, thinking the same thing. They asked Jacqueline to try again, but she doubted it would even work. She only agreed, so those 3 would finally stop bugging her about it. She placed her hands on it and waited a bit, but nothing happened. She was about to walk away, but then everyone noticed something was up. The tracker started glowing with a bright violet light. The girls were expecting it, but they were still in shock, especially Jacqueline, because this meant the person she'd been searching for was close by. What's more, the light was brighter in one direction, like it was pointing the way. Jacqueline grabbed the device and was the first to bolt from the table to find her friend. She ran as fast as she could, terrified the device would shut down. So, she ran all the way to this weird wrought iron door that led to the kitchen. Jacqueline threw it open, which totally freaked out all the kitchen staff. Some of them started asking what this guest was doing in the kitchen, but she just started staring at every single servant, looking for Merlin. One of them was trying to hide her face, and Jacqueline went straight for her. Then she tugged her by the shoulder and just froze, shocked and happy. It really was Merlin. She'd been hiding in the kitchen with the other servants, but she greeted her former partner politely. And Jacqueline, stumbling over her words with happiness, started begging for forgiveness. Even though she knew there was no forgiving what she'd done, she still asked Merlin to come back. Bursting into tears, she swore the other woman didn't even need to work, just be there. And she begged Merlin to never leave her again. Merlin just laughed, saying if she didn't want to come back, she wouldn't have been hiding here. Jacqueline's face, wet with tears, froze again in surprise and fresh shock, but it passed quickly, and she hugged her friend tightly, almost squeezing the air out of her. Merlin hugged her back. She wasn't even mad at the workaholic. Not only the servants watched this scene, but also Kanemia and the Behemoth sisters. Later, Jacqueline and Merlin were getting ready to leave, and the Archduchess was sad to see them go. She'd gotten used to having them around, and the two of them were grateful for everything she'd done for them. And Tien proved the theory that the best hiding place is right out in the open. Kinemi's still wondering how Merlin even got into the castle. She's gonna check out the security and run some background checks, though. Before she left, she asked Merlin to just talk next time instead of, hexing people. She was talking about that overeating curse that hit Jacqueline. Merlin swore she didn't do anything like that, but then something clicked a while back when she was about to head out of town. There was this weird old lady at the bus stop, harmless looking though. Merlin, being super polite, gave the old lady her seat. All the while, she was still worried about Jacqueline, hoping she was eating enough. The old lady noticed she was sighing like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders, especially being so young. And she told me about a friend she had a little falling out with over some cash. She got upset and left, but she's still worried about her. But she can't go back either, because that would be a real blow to her pride. And her friend isn't the type to admit she's wrong and apologize. Turns out the old lady was a witch and promised to help make that friend see the light. It's only now that Merlin realizes that witch is the one who put the hex on her. Before, she just thought Jacqueline was stress-eating like crazy. They both thanked the Archduchess again for her help. And at the Information Guild, Jacqueline promised to hook her up with VIP treatment. Plus, she got the info Kanemia asked for and left it with her vassals. Meanwhile, the head priest of the church was cursing like a freaking sailor. He was pissed that his priests couldn't handle just one guy. But this dude's been leaning on them for ages, backed by the nobles, and they can't cover for the priest anymore. And all they were doing in the first place was following orders. He couldn't figure out why the Archduchess would do something like this, like she's got some master plan. The priest was planning on ditching the empire before this blew up and reached the emperor. He threw his stuff together and was heading for the door, but it suddenly swung open on its own. Elder Moulton was standing there, smirking, asking where he thought he was going. The head priest demanded to be let through, but they just asked him the same question again. He begged again, promising the elder his position, when more people walked in. They wrestled the high priest to the ground and twisted his arms behind his back. He demanded they let him go, saying Moulton had no right to punish him. But another figure in a robe approached and told him not to worry. It was Kanemia, and she assured him that other people would be taking care of the punishment. She thanked the elder for his cooperation and handed over the documents about the corruption. The priest tried to argue, but Moulton wasn't surprised he'd been lining his own pockets. And all his buddies are busy covering their tracks right now, so they can't help him. Besides, he won't be able to reach them, seeing as how he skipped town today. Kanemia explained that no one would find him, not even Elder Moulton. Realizing they were going to off him, the priest tried to break free, but it was no use. Ayan, who'd shown up too, suggested shutting him up to save our ears. I mean, he was screaming for help and cursing everyone out, and Kanemia gave the okay. Turns out, that was the high priest's last holler. A little later, the Archduchess invited the owner of the Mokdo mountain range. Kanemia needed those hot springs, so they signed a cooperation agreement. She even offered him a tour of the castle, but he was in a hurry to get back. Still, it was getting late, so Kanemia offered him a room for the night. But the guy turned her down, saying he had urgent business to take care of. He got curious about when the Archduchess planned to start growing the magic herb. All things considered, she was planning to kick things off next month. Mokdo told her not to overdo it, and to take her time, put her heart into it. Then he left, and the Behemoth sisters, who just walked in, noticed that this guy had been around recently. Kanemia explained that they signed the contract, so now there wouldn't be any problems with cultivation. Because of that, she used to get headaches a lot, but now the problem is solved. Now the Archduchess can finally catch a break for a while. But before she knew it, she got word that they were facing some serious difficulties. The alchemists who went to the mountains sent a message saying that something was wrong with the springs. In the letter, they wrote that they arrived at the mountain range a few days ago, and discovered that the Ham's hot springs were completely frozen over. The climate around the range is harsh too. It's basically winter all year round. The locals are saying there was a fire up on the peak, and now everything's frozen solid. There's an ancient artifact right in the heart of the mountain range. The fire burning in that artifact made these mountains and hot springs so special. But it went out a few months ago, and only a mage can relight it. That's why the alchemists are begging the Archduchess to send a mage up there. Kinemia finally gets why Mokto was in such a rush. He totally played her. She was muttering about a mage to herself, and Ian, hearing her, pops up right away. The girl turns and sees his smug face, like he's waiting for a gold star or something. Then she explained that there were problems in the mountains, and the artifact needed its fire lit. Ian explained that because of the artifact's barrier, teleporting there is a no-go. The trip's about a week, but it's necessary, and Kinemia promised to hook everyone up. The guy agreed, but only if his lady came along for the ride. The Archduchess hates the cold, but we gotta deal with this situation somehow. Plus, she was kinda stressed about having to travel with Ian. Noticing she was lost in thought, the guy figured she was dodging him for some reason. There wasn't any reason, and the Archduchess was totally down for the journey too. When the carriage crossed the border into snow-covered territory, Ian was checking everything out, all curious. But the girl was more bummed that this always happens. And on top of that, it's freezing. After a while, they got to a place where the carriage couldn't go any further. They kept going on foot, and Kinemia kept asking why they couldn't just teleport. But if we do that, the artifact's enchantment could crumble. Seeing she was beat, Ayan offered her a piggyback, but she turned him down. After all, she trains hard and has plenty of strength to keep going. In her pocket was a little something the Behemoth clan made for her. Shortly before her departure, they came to her as soon as they heard the news. Though, they were more concerned about the Archduchess staying out all night with her boyfriend. She told them to lay off again and explained the reason for the trip. She had to leave the next day, and her sisters managed to deliver her order in time. A bracelet she'd asked them to make for her friend. It had a bright blue sapphire and looked amazing. Kinemia was thrilled. After that, even though the sisters promised not to tease her, they kept asking her to think about what was really going on in her heart. Lana didn't know why the lady was denying it, but it was clear to them that she and Ian were into each other. And it really sucks for her to see people trying to hide the feelings they have. As Kinemia trudged along the snowy path, she remembered that conversation. But her relationship with Ian had been built on a lie from the start, and she's pretty sure that guy's hiding something from her too. She still doesn't get why he's so nice to her, and why he's even hanging around the Archduchy. And what if she tells him she knew about him from the beginning, and was trying to avoid him? But now he's important to her, and she's not sure he'll be as open about his feelings. Suddenly, Ian turned around, thinking he'd heard her call his name. Just then, the girl slipped on the ice and went flying forward, right into Ian's arms, who caught her before she could get hurt. It was a total accident, even though it might have looked staged. They were almost at the summit, and the guy kept asking if Kinemia was tired. And after a little while longer, they finally reached the artifact. Giving his friend a sly look, Ian asked if he should light it up. The girl confirmed, and he raised his palm, magic starting to gather above it. And after some fiddling around, the artifact was burning with blue flame again. That was easier than the Archduchess had expected. And then Ian asked her to take a look, pointing off to the side. Everything around here's starting to change too. The snow's melting like crazy. Pretty soon, patches of green grass started popping up, and the trees, which were totally bare before, just exploded with spring blossoms. It was so beautiful, Kinemia couldn't stop gushing about it. Ian was watching her, and surrounded by all this beauty, the most beautiful thing to him was Kinemia. The guy just blurted out the compliment, and it totally caught her off guard. Then she gave him a gift, thanking him for lighting the fire, and for the Festival of Destiny. The mage was kinda stunned staring at the bracelet, and she figured he didn't like it again. After all, he wasn't wearing the bracelet she gave him before anymore. And then he pulled it out of his pocket, admitting he kept it inside so it wouldn't break. He used to mess with him when he missed Kinemia, but now he's stoked to see her every day. Still, she didn't get it. First, he was practically begging to get caught by security. Then he was tailing her as a bodyguard. He treated her so damn well that whole time, but then ghosted her for 5 years. That's why she was so bummed and just wanted a straight answer. Ayan first asked if she'd still feel the same way about him if she knew the reason. The girl was a little taken aback. It sounded like he was about to confess to something major, and she asked him to say what he just said again. But the guy just smirked and told her to forget about it. Then he suggested they head down. And Kinemia realized he wasn't going to tell her anything,